Chrono Ark, produced by Alpine Studio, is a game which, if somebody mentions it to me, I'll say the words Chrono Ark 15 times in the next 20 minutes. During my latest ramblings about Chrono Ark, my sibling told me I should do a video essay on it. Something clicked. I don't know how to video essay, but their comment rang true down to my core. I need to video essay for Chrono Ark. I get so excited about Chrono Ark that I become annoyingly desperate for someone to reciprocate the same response I have to the game. The world looks so nice. The characters are mechanically interesting. I think the story is neat. I'll say to a meager, okay. Unfortunately, the people I usually share these types of games with did not latch on to Chrono Ark with the same fervor that I have. One of my friends liked the deck building side of things, but not the party management. One of them took one look at the art and noped out of that conversation. My sibling can't get past the machine-translated dialogue and text on the cards. All of these are fair points. I think this is why I must video essay. I need to express my love for this game. Chrono Ark is one of the only things that makes me want to shout to everyone about how much I love it. I need to talk about Chrono Ark's charms, complexities, and surprises. It's not a 10 out of 10 game. I know that, but it's a 10 out of 10 game for me. I love Chrono Ark. So what is this game? On a basic level, Chrono Ark is a roguelite, a dungeon crawler, and a deck building game. Roguelites are like old arcade games where if you lose, you have to start over from the beginning, but unlike arcade games, there are meta systems that carry your progress and unlocks for your next run. Examples include Hades by Supergiant Games or Dead Cells by Motion Twin. Dungeon crawlers are games in which a single person or party of adventurers go deeper into a zone to fight enemies, manage resources, and get treasure. Some examples are Blizzard's Diablo or Red Hook's Darkest Dungeon. While both of these influences are important for Chrono Ark, I want to spend more time on the deck builder genre. Chrono Ark is first and foremost a deck builder. Deck builders are card games in which your cards are your actions. In this genre of games, your cards are your controls. They are how you interact with the game's systems. Let's separate this into two categories, deck and building. Deck. You have a deck of cards, and each turn you draw cards representing what actions you can take. Depending on the game, these cards could be gathering resources, attacking enemies, or trying to navigate a conversation. What makes a deck of cards mechanically interesting is the fact that you are limited in what actions you can take on a turn. Even if your deck of cards have attack cards, defense cards, and healing cards, you will only have a small fraction of your deck to access each turn. That means you physically cannot have the ability to always attack, defend, or heal. You might draw 5 attack cards when you need to block. Contrast this to a standard action selection system, such as RPGs like Final Fantasy or Dungeons & Dragons. You can take any action your character has as long as you have the resources required. Your barbarian might need to step next to a goblin to swing their sword, but does not need to have a specific swing sword card in order to do that action. What this hand of cards creates is a limited and pseudo-random space in which you can take your turn. There is a random chance on what you're going to draw, but it's not truly random compared to, say, rolling dice. With dice, you might be extremely lucky or unlucky. The chance to roll boxcars or snake eyes 2 times in a row is 1 in 1,296. It's impossibly small, but it still happens. With a deck of cards, you need to draw every single card in your deck before you shuffle your discarded cards to form a new deck to draw from again. If you see the Ace of Spades, you know then you can't draw another Ace of Spades. What this means for the deck building genre is if you have a really impactful card, once you draw it, you need to wait until you draw every other card in your deck to draw that card again. This then segues into building. Chrono Ark differs from classic collectible trading card games such as Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! As you do not bring your own pre-constructed deck to the game. You create the deck as you play the game. You're building the plane as you fly it, as the saying goes. You always start with a couple of basic cards, but the fun and challenge of deck builders is trying to make the best deck from limited choices. The deck you end up with will be drastically different than the one you started out with. This gives the genre its addicting replayability. Deck building as a mechanic is both strategic yet lucky. It can attract casual players who like surprise and thinking on their feet, and card sharks who use statistics and probability to craft their perfect deck. It has such a low floor to entry, yet such a high skill ceiling. It's easy for anyone who has used a deck of cards to understand, but has all the intricacies and nuances that let you optimize and become more skilled at the genre. The work you put into mastery is rewarded in dividends, and these fundamental deck building skills transfer from one deck builder to another. It's not surprising that the genre has exploded in popularity in the last few years, with Mega Crit's game Slay the Spire heralding the charge. Like many others, Slay the Spire was my first video game deck builder. I can't say I was the guy who was playing Peter Whalen's Dream Quest before it was cool, but I can say I had cut my teeth on plenty of physical deck builders in my past. Dominion, Tyrants of the Underdark, and Moonrakers are my personal favorites. Deck builders have been widely explored in the physical space. It's no surprise that they made their way to a digital format as well. I applaud Mega Crit Games for this new wave of digital deck builders. I find it fascinating that these digital deck building games are mirroring what happened with physical deck builders. Pure deck building in the board game scene has become less of the main focus of board games and more of a mechanic in the greater genre of games. For example, Tyrants of the Underdark fuses deck building with trying to control points on a map, and Moonrakers combines deck building with shrewd negotiation with other players. While Slay the Spire isn't as pure as other deck builders like Dominion, it's still the launching point for the digital genre. It's like Tolkien. You can't talk about fantasy without his work being included in the discussion. Games look at Slay the Spire and try to imitate it or ask how they can differ from it. Much like in the physical board game space, deck building is a wonderfully malleable mechanic. You have auto-battlers with deck building. You have tower defense games with deck building. You have other games mixed with deck building. You have maximalist versions of Slay the Spire, like Shiny Shoes Monster Train, and minimalist versions like Giant Games Night of Full Moon. So where does that leave Chrono Ark? Since we have to compare, it's more mechanically complex than Slay the Spire. You have multiple party members. Each has their own passives, cards, internal synergies, and external synergies. You have to manage combat health, equipment, and experience points. There is more to manage in combat, and more that can go horribly wrong. Chrono Ark looks at the genre standards and pushes away into the experimental and murky waters. Chrono Ark is sometimes messy and unintuitive. Chrono Ark reaches far beyond its grasp. Chrono Ark shouldn't work, and yet it does. Chrono Ark is truly fascinating, and I truly love it. Talking about the game mechanics in Chrono Ark is difficult. There are no easy comparisons to make. It's not just Slay the Spire plus X. It takes almost every fundamental aspect of the genre and shatters them. Chrono Ark puts these shattered pieces back together into a mosaic, greater than the sum of its parts. Because of this, talking about a single mechanic usually leads me to talking about another connected mechanic, and then another until I've explained the entire game, or started chanting the words Chrono Ark like a religious zealot. To truly encapsulate why I love this game, I'm going to need to dive deep into the mechanics. Don't be surprised if I start chanting. Let's start with the deck you build, since this game is a deck builder. In Chrono Ark, you have your main character, Lucy, the Girl of Prophecy. You also have 2 to 4 party members called investigators, each with their own cards. Sword Boy's cards stab people, Heal Girl's cards heal people, etc., etc. Parties of characters in dungeon crawlers and deck builders are not new, but what's different is that in Chrono Ark, you share a deck between characters. It's not Sword Boy's deck and Heal Girl's deck, but one singular deck for all of your party members. This shared deck adds an effect where every card you put in from one character makes it less likely for cards for the rest of your party to be drawn. More Heal Girl cards lowers the chance of drawing Sword Boy cards. Another effect of each character contributing to the same shared deck is that you cannot thin your deck. A golden rule in deck builders is the less cards in your deck, the better. It seems counterintuitive at first, but with less weak cards in your deck, you will go through all of the cards to draw your powerful cards faster. Less fluff, more juice. Unlike its contemporaries, you cannot slim down your deck to the point of all juice in Chrono Ark. Each character has a minimum of 5 cards, so the absolute smallest deck you can have with 4 party members is 20 cards. You need the ability to draw and cycle to push through your deck. There's nothing worse than drawing 2 cards at the start of your turn and not having anything else to do with your mana. Luckily, the designers added 3 primary mechanics to assist you with this. First, they added specific draw cards you can obtain through Lucy. These are generally draw 2 cards with an upside, or draw 3 cards with a conditional downside. These Lucy draw cards are not free. They cost soul stones. Soul stones are also the currency used to level up your investigators and increase your overall maximum mana. You always need some draw power to succeed, but you'll need to balance out how many Lucy draw cards you want to put in your deck. Second, once per turn you can exchange a card, discarding a card to draw a new card. It's not a net positive on cards, 1 card for 1 card, but it allows you to get rid of a card you don't need at that moment to draw into a card you do need. You should always use this unless you are desperately in need of the cards in your hand. This helps you cycle through your deck faster to see your good cards again. A fun side note, if a party member gets stunned, then you can exchange one of their cards to remove the stun. You lose the card in exchange for the turn, but it gives you counterplay against annoying stuns. Finally, your party members also have fixed abilities. Most cards in the game can be fixed to your party members. You remove the card from your deck, but you always have the option to play that card every turn. You can only play 1 fixed ability each turn, unless otherwise stated, and they cost 1 additional mana. It's a reliable, albeit expensive option. Since we're on the subject, let's talk about mana. Much like your deck, your party also shares a mana pool. This is not great, as most of the time you won't have enough mana to play all of your cards in a turn. On top of that, when one character plays a card, they become overloaded, making their subsequent cards cost more mana. Play another one of their cards and they become even more overloaded. Oof. This mechanic further compounds the issue of putting too much into one character. For example, if you only see Sword Boy cards, then each time you play one of his cards, all of the other cards cost more mana. The designers built off this limitation of sharing a mana pool by fundamentally shifting a key aspect of the deck builder genre. You do not discard your hand at the end of turn. If you can't play a card this turn, don't worry. You can play it next turn when you have more mana and less overload. With no limit on holding cards, other than your max hand size of 10, you can save a card until the exact moment you need it. What I like about this system is it moves away from the roguelite deck building peers and leans towards more traditional card games such as Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone. In Slay the Spire and most physical deck builders such as Dominion, because you must discard all of your cards at the end of the turn, you're looking to optimize each hand. Of course you'll play every card you can, even if it has minimal effect. You're only playing for tempo, or how effective you can be with your cards at that moment of time. I love those games, so don't take this as Chrono Ark being superior, it's just a different design space. Because you have the ability to hold cards between turns in Chrono Ark, you have to ask the question of how much value are you getting out of the card. In other words, are you squeezing the most amount of juice out of that card? Tempo and value are a bit nebulous, so let me use a couple of scenarios. In situation 1, you have 1 mana left and the only card you can play is a 1 mana heal spell that heals 15 HP. Currently, your only wounded party member is missing 2 HP. The tempo play is to heal them for 2 HP, as you don't want to waste your mana. The value play is to wait until someone is more wounded, healing them for 15 HP. Contrast this to Slay the Spire. You would always make the tempo play of healing for 2 HP. The healing card will be discarded if not used, and 2 HP is better than 0 HP and wasting 1 mana. The other scenario is you have 2 mana and your only person who can attack is overloaded by 1. They can play their 1 mana, 20 damage attack for 2 mana, which is terrible value. Mathematically speaking, at 2 mana, that attack is 10 damage per mana. At 1 mana, it is 20 damage per mana. That card is literally half as good as compared to playing it at 1 mana. Instead of wasting the extra mana attacking, you could just not attack and wait for a turn for the card to go back down to 1. You could use the 2 mana for deploying shields or healing. Maybe you use that mana to draw cards. That's even more value. But if you play the attack now, you would squeeze the most amount of damage out of this turn. You win by killing all of the enemies, and dead enemies can't hurt you. With each combat having a sort of soft time limit, you can't just wait around forever. Do you go with value or tempo? These fundamental shifts to the genre open up new and interesting possibility space for decisions to be made. Should you play a card now when it costs more mana? Which characters should you add a card for? If you go too heavy into one character, your mana pool will be less efficient. Suddenly, there are diminishing returns for going all in on one character. You need to balance your party. Yet the more you go in on one character, the more you make use of their passives and equipment. You can freely exchange a card per turn, but which card do you discard? If you have been saving a card for 2 turns, do you really need it? If you pitch it, then why were you holding on to it? Sure, it's the main piece of your combo, but can you just wait to draw the other piece? Or do you need a better card for the situation right now? What if your character gets stunned? You need the ability to counter that, but you want to cycle your cards. Is it worth the risk? Okay, let's pull back for a second. I know I'm making it sound like a lot, but it's not as hard as it seems. Most of the time, it's pretty straightforward. Sword Boy stab, Heal Girl heal, and draw cards to do more of that. Easy. On the deck building side, you add cards that sound good, or cards that combo with your current cards, and with mana, you can count out how much mana you have, and if you can play the cards you need. The UI shows you which cards will be overloaded if you were to play a card, so it's pretty easy to tell. While the choices are complex, it's easier to pick up than it seems. Let's dive into the next mechanic, and I'll try to refrain myself from chanting. Adding to the weirdness of Chrono Ark's mechanics is how turns work. Nothing can be straightforward in Chrono Ark. Enemies don't wait around for you to do your thing like a standard RPG, they're there to kill you. Turns are structured like a countdown. Each enemy will do their attack in X actions as seen by the hourglass near their life. That number will count down every time you play a normal card until finally the enemy takes their turn. Some cards with swiftness, i.e. a blue gem next to the mana cost, can be played without affecting the enemy's turn counter. What the system creates is varied and uneven turns. Sometimes it follows a normal Slay the Spire or JRPG turn structure of you taking your full turn, then the enemy takes their full turn. Other times you are trading blows back and forth, weaving attacks and healing in between the enemy's actions. Sometimes the enemy makes the first move, and all you can do is react. This is balanced. You can even manipulate this system by getting equipment with a speed stat that increases the enemy's countdown, or by clicking the little hourglass to decrease it. This dynamism creates a different kind of back and forth in how you interact with the enemy, allowing you to time your cards just right, or allowing the enemies to throw wrenches into your plan. You might have this epic combo, but if a character gets critically wounded halfway through, do you stop your combo to heal them? Is it worth the risk of them possibly dying with the next hit? Since we are on characters dying, let's talk about healing. I'll admit, taking damage and healing in this game is unintuitive. I'll try my best to simplify it. If a character is hit, they take damage. That much is the same. Once hit, they then get a healing gauge equal to the damage they've received. This is represented by a green bar on their HP. Healing will only take full effect for that healing gauge. If you end a battle, all healing gauge will recover to full. This means if a character gets hit, you still have time to heal them or kill the enemies to not actually lose HP. If they instead get hit while they have healing gauge, then tough shit. That healing gauge is gone, and they get a new healing gauge from the damage of the second hit. Because healing only takes full effect for the healing gauge, healing past the healing gauge is a slog. It's not impossible to get back to full health, but it's not easy either. While I have not seen HP in an RPG set up this way before, it reminds me of the temporary recoverable health in Darkstalkers or Bloodborne mixed with reacting to damage in the Mother series. That's not a helpful description. I like to think of it as the character not really taking damage until they're hit again. Some kind of quantum health bar that's not helpful either. The easiest way to break down this mechanic is if you see a big green life bar on the party member, you should do something about it or expect to lose that health the next time they're hit. If a character goes to 0 HP, they don't die. Not immediately, at least. They go to death's door. If they are at 0 or less HP, the next time they are hit, then they die, taking the character and their cards out of battle. There's a slight chance to endure fatal damage, but don't rely on that low percentage. After fainting, characters can only be revived after combat with special items, or when you reach a campfire after a boss fight. If a character at death's door is healed above 0 HP, the status death's door is removed and they are good to go. Because of this system, plus how the healing gauge works, enemy damage and healing can be dynamic and interesting without it just being healing equals number goes up. This is balanced. I will talk about it later, but I have to say the healers in Chrono Ark are unique and interesting, with a large part of it being how the healing gauge and death store work. The only other mechanics are pretty straightforward. You get inventory items like bread, potions, and herbs to use in and out of combat. These one-time effects give mana, generate cards, remove debuffs, etc. Nothing new here if you've played Slay the Spire, Darkest Dungeon, or any video game with consumable items. Equipment gives stat bonuses. Nice. You only get 2 equipment slots, and most equipments have a minor downside you need to be mindful of. While the equipment you get is random, there is some mitigation. When opening treasure chests, you get to pick between 2 items of the same rarity. If that's not enough, then at campfires between areas, you can smith equipments 2 for 1 to either increase the rarity of it or reforge it at the same rarity. While the second highest and highest tier equipment is interesting and dynamic, most of the time you just put your best attack item on Sword Boy and best healer item on Heal Girl. Relics are nice to have, but never mandatory to win. These are passive bonuses such as having debuff resist or starting combat with extra mana. Unlike artifacts in other roguelite deck builders, you only get 4 slots, so you have to make some choices on which relics to use. When you defeat enemies, or sometimes as random loot, you get soul stones. As previously mentioned, you use these to level up your characters, increase your maximum mana, or add Lucy cards to draw more cards. Because they are a shared resource, there is some tension in where you spend your soul stones, but usually it turns into which person do you want to level up first, and make sure to upgrade your mana and add a couple of draw cards in there. As you defeat bosses, you gain credits. This currency stays with you in between runs. You can spend them at Laren's lab to unlock new relics, equipment, skills, and general upgrades for each subsequent run. This system is part of the game that makes it a roguelite, allowing you to gain progress between runs. You can also use credits to buy gifts for increasing your friendship with the other investigators. We'll touch more on that later. There are a few bits and bobs, but that's it for the mechanics section. Whew! What I love about Chrono Ark's mechanics is that they all add this underlying tension to your decisions. Do you do option A or B? Which is better? Tempo or value? From deck building to playing cards, turn order, and even healing, there is this tension. Because you can't have everything you want, you need to make a decision. Sometimes the choices you make are easy. Sometimes it will decide your entire run. This tension and possibility space allows the system to create interesting and weird characters, cards, enemies, and situations. Now that we've gone through the system mechanics, I want to talk about the real meat of the game, the characters. I hem and hawed about how in-depth I should go for each character. I'm enough of a dork I could do a full in-depth breakdown of each character's card, but then we'd be here all day. Let me know if you want an 8-hour-long video about every character's cards. Characters are split into 3 categories: offense, defense, and support. They're not hard and fast definitions. Offense characters can have great utility, and support characters can have powerful attacks, but it's a nice guideline for what a character adds to your party. Of course, how the characters work in their respective categories differ as well. A defense character might be about taking hits for other characters, or might focus on stunning the enemy instead. The true joy of Chrono Ark is exploring each character's design and how they connect and interlock together to form a party. This section is not for balanced reviews or optimization on how to win. This is what I like and dislike about the characters on a mechanical level. There are probably other better resources available if you want to know what's imbalanced, or if you want to know the most effective teams for pushing the hardest content, but that's not what this section is. Alright, let's get started. Azar is your good standard anime sword boy. In combat, Azar is an offense character whose main mechanics is creating illusion swords. These swords are weak, zero-cost attack cards that you have to play that turn, but you get a lot of them. Like, a lot of them. If you've played Slay the Spire, it's basically a Shiv deck. Stab, 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 stab. You get these illusion swords from Azar's cards, or Azar's passive. At the start of the turn, the top card in your hand gains an illusion sword buff. If you play, exchange, or discard a card with this buff, you get a free illusion sword. Azar's main strategy is to get as many illusion swords as possible, and then leverage them with his other cards. Shining Aura can make all of his illusion swords crit. Ascending Strike doubles your illusion swords in hand. And Blade Starfall deals more damage for each illusion sword buff you have. Wonderful. While the mechanics and characters are one note, compiling a massive amount of illusion swords and then synergizing with his other cards for massive damage, it is both powerful and satisfying. Overall, Azar is probably one of the most straightforward characters and a great starter character to get the system mechanics down. As you play, you'll find more and more uses for his illusion swords other than just weak attacks. Joey is a support character dealing with healing and poison. He is incredibly straightforward, even more so than Azar. Joey deals with effects that last over time, whether that is healing or damage. Cards like Healing Potion and Healing Vapor give direct healing, while also supplying a buff that heals the party member at the start of their turn. While it's not as strong as healing from his cards, these buffs do provide damage mitigation throughout a long fight. The other half of Joey's toolkit is damage over time and debuffs. Chemical Substance number 12 provides a huge amount of poison damage, and Chemical Weapon gives a buff causing your allies' attacks to also poison the enemy. Damage over time effects deal damage right before the enemy takes their action, so it is most useful on enemies who take multiple actions per turn. Great is the weapon that cuts on its own. Joey is probably the least mechanically interesting character in the game. Don't confuse that with being ineffective. He is very good at what he does. With buffs, debuffs, and stuns, he has great utility and can slot into most lineups. Just when your passive is getting a free potion every time you level up, I feel like there's more design space here that could be tapped into. While you need straightforward characters to round out your party, a little more spice to his toolkit would go a long way. Overall, a mechanically effective character, even if he's uninspired compared to the rest of the cast. Ms. Chain is a defense character who is great at shredding armor and enhancing your team. Her main mechanic is Burn, with 3 N's. After she uses a card or fixed ability, she gains a buff which grants her healing gauge protection. If her healing gauge is hit, no problem, she keeps it. This is helpful because healing will always have full effect on Ms. Chain. Once she has Burn with 3 N's, her cards activate new abilities. These range from healing your party, reducing damage your party takes, providing counterattacks, etc. This really gives Ms. Chain a 1-2 punch kind of playstyle as you activate Burn with 3 N's, and then use cards that have bonus effects when she has Burn with 3 N's. These bonus effects are so powerful Some of her cards are almost not worth playing unless you get the bonus effect. Not all of her cards have bonus effects. Those cards are better for triggering her Burn with 3 Ends passive, but the issue is they're generally not as good as her cards with bonus effects. You have to balance how many setup and payoff cards, 1-2 punches, you are going to add to your deck. If done right, you can get so much more out of her toolkit. Miss Chain is more of a supplementary character to your group. While she's not useless on her own, she's better at amplifying your teammates' power. Playing with fire and Shred Them All greatly amplifies your teammates' damage over time. Zoom and Dismantle Armor removes the enemy's armor, making your team's direct damage hit harder. She is best in a role where she makes your team shine. Overall, a pretty straightforward character with an interesting give and take. Hein is an offense character with a specialty of taking down groups of enemies. While there are intricacies with his toolkit, for the most part you play a card and he hits hard. No frills. His passive trait, Madness, rewards hitting low health enemies as hard as you can, as the excess damage from killing an enemy is transferred onto a random enemy. You can chain this passive, causing the entire enemy line to explode. Beautiful. His toolkit is better for crowds than a single target, but that doesn't mean he can't put out sufficient single target damage. The other half of Hein's toolkit is that he can hurt himself to deal massive damage. This isn't too surprising of a mechanic, considering Hein is covered in blood, talks about blood all the time, and references blood in most of his cards. He reminds me of the Flagellant from Darkest Dungeon, or Black Decks in Magic the Gathering. Starting with Hein can be difficult at first due to how the healing gauge works. In most games, healing is a binary. You heal for a number, and your HP goes up for that number. With healing gauge, if you don't immediately heal Hein, you will lose the healing gauge when he's hit and be stuck trying to heal him back to max. And as I said before, it's a slog to heal back to max HP. It's another level of consideration you will need to make when using Hein. Or just accept that you'll be rolling dice at death's door every time you get into a fight. He is most powerful if you can ride that line between life and death. Plus, exploding groups of enemies is so satisfying. Prezel is a support character with powerful heals and damage. While her toolkit is relatively straightforward, I love Prezel. Not just because her name sounds like my favorite food, but because she has one of my favorite passives. Every turn, the second card you draw is prophesized, which is a fancy way of saying you get to see 2 to 4 cards in your deck and choose one to draw. While other passives might be mechanically stronger than this, Prophecy is incredibly flexible, allowing you to get the specific card you need for the situation. Need a heal? Pick a heal. Lacking a combo piece? Grab the combo piece. Short on card draw? Now you're not. It's just so nice. This mechanic also changes how I build decks, as there are some cards that are either only good in certain situations, or excel when they have other cards to combo with. This filtering system allows those cards to be ready for you exactly when you need them. As for her cards, they're pretty straightforward. She has powerful direct healing cards like Healing Coil, cards that enhance your prophecies like Holy Light, and strong single target damage cards like First Class to Heaven. Just because she's a support character does not mean she can't contribute significant damage to your team. Prezel's other key mechanic is that her cards have bonus effects if you pick them from a prophecy. These can be pretty sweet bonuses such as extra healing, extra damage, and reducing the mana cost of the card. They're not as powerful as Ms. Chain burn with 3 ends mechanic. Pretzels are more of a cherry on top effect. I'm glad it's designed to be a small buff to the card, as it creates a more interesting choice between picking the Prophecy card of Pretzel or picking a more impactful card from someone else. Overall, she's a great starter character, and I'm always glad to have her on my team. Ironheart is a defense character who specializes in barriers, comboing off healing, and party buffs. Ironheart's toolkit is powerful, but incomplete on its own. For example, Ironheart's passive is to turn excess healing into barriers, which give temporary HP. Think of these like Block from Slay the Spire. Ironheart has no healing cards other than the 1 shoddy healing cards he starts with. His cards Shield Bash and Shockwave sacrifice individual barriers to deal massive damage. Ironheart cannot generate individual barriers from his cards. He's the opposite of a character like Azar. Azar's setup mechanic, spawning illusion swords, comes from his cards, and the payoff, like dealing damage per illusion sword, also come from his own cards. Ironheart either needs the setup or the payoff to come from his teammates. He's kind of like a volleyball player. He can bump or spike, but he needs someone else to do the other half. While I'm a big fan of this kind of design, it's an odd choice to make him one of the starting characters, as you really need to know what your party members can do in the game to make his toolkit shine. For example, take Innocent Armor. This card lowers debuffs by 1 turn and extends all buffs for an extra turn. To maximize the most out of this card, you need to know what characters have buffs to extend. More importantly, what characters have buffs that are so good you want them for an extra turn. When you do get Ironheart working though, he's a powerhouse. Innocent Armor extending big combo pieces like Mirage or Mobius Strip, or huge defensive buffs like Stand United or Dark Sanctuary can swing the battle into your favor. You can get party heals and cards that double barriers to make Shield Bash absolutely clobber enemies. At the start, I would recommend sticking to his more straightforward cards before jumping into his cards that require knowledge of other characters' decks. The more you play with other characters, the more you'll look at a card and go, oh yeah, that would be a good card to combo with Ironheart. Let's take a break from characters and talk about Chrono Ark's presentation. On a presentation level, I think Chrono Ark has a lot more highs than low. When I first booted up the game, I was expecting fantasy anime schlock, and while there's still some of that schlock, well, a lot of that schlock, Chrono Ark surprised me. Where I expected action and adventure, instead Chrono Ark presents melancholy and sadness. The world is dying. The intro cutscene shows the world being covered in an unknown darkness. This black fog corrupted the world and destroyed humanity. The remaining top scientists created the Ark, a floating city for the last remnants of humanity. While this world is doomed, the scientists left a way to save humanity. If those remaining can activate the clock tower, they can turn back time and stop this catastrophe. While it's a cool setup, unfortunately the story lands a bit on its face with its very video gamey nature. Our main character, Lucy, wakes up in a field and is greeted by Azar. Lucy has amnesia. Azar tells her that she is the quote-unquote girl of prophecy. If she is able to find the 4 Time Shard MacGuffins, she can activate the Clock Tower Ex Machina. It's tropes upon tropes upon tropes. I'll have more to say on the story in the spoiler section, but it's not the strongest setup for the plot. The weak localization does not help either, leading to rigid and sometimes clunky dialogue. While the English is legible and conveys the story, it still feels like it needs more work. However, the atmosphere and non-verbal forms of communication is what carries the mood. From the cold colors of the world to the low, soft piano music, you get the hopeless dying world vibes that the story was trying to get across. The Ark is your main base before you start your journey, and it has such an amazing aesthetic. A floating city of lights burning ever against the darkness. The city is filled with dark blues and purples. A spherical grid illuminates the night sky. A mix of magic and technology permeates the Ark. The vibes are not, yeah, let's go adventure, but more of, this is the last chance or humanity is doomed. I personally would love to visit the Ark in real life, or at least in VR, as it's breathtaking. While the inner workings of the world is a kitchen sink approach with magic, guns, robots, sword fighters, all thrown in together, this kind of mood is what I want out of fantasy games. It's whimsical, but still has this sad and desperate feeling. I'm going to hold a bit and let you take this in. The environments you journey through carry the same mood. The three areas you go to are moonlit forests, autumn carnivals, and snowy ruins. This is a great game to play in the fall or winter. While the levels are procedurally generated, the environmental assets they pull from look so nice I forget that this was randomly spit out of a machine. The artists do wonderful jobs of environmental work, adding intricate details you only notice once you take some time to stop and look. The music also helps convey this melancholy mood. Most of the songs are pretty low-key, with instrumentals ranging from pianos and strings to some drums and synth. Every once in a while you get more pizzazz, such as electric guitars or full EDM tracks. But for the most part, it's subtle and soft. The boss music ramps up, matching the intensity of the fight. While we're talking about music, I need to talk about how the overworld music blends perfectly with the combat music. I checked the game files and confirmed that there are 2 tracks of the exact same length that are playing at the same time. The combat track starts muted, and when you enter combat, it mutes the overworld track and unmutes the combat track. Because the combat track is just a more intense version of the overworld track, you get a practically seamless transition into combat. Once you win, it then switches back to the overworld track. Awesome. Dynamic audio like this isn't new. Transistor by Supergiant Games also did this audio effect much earlier, but more games should do this. It really ties together the area you're at and the action you're doing. It's way better than a hard cut from Peaceful Travels to Epic Battles, even if both of those songs are great. For the character designs, I have to say I like the majority of them, and there are some real winners. None of these designs are things I've never seen before, and a couple ladies lean strongly to the anime schlock side of things. Despite all of that, for this kind of art style, Chrono Ark rides the line between generic and boring, and why would you wear that when you know you're going to be fighting for your life? It's easy to over-design characters in this art style, and I think the artist showed a strong level of restraint here. Some suspension of disbelief is needed, but I think these character designs are relatively grounded. Personally, I'm a big fan of Narhan, Huz, and my one true love, Ilya. We'll come back to that. I could take or leave the chibis, though this bird eating bread animation is amazing. Yes! I think the same applies to the enemy design. It's just more extreme. Some enemies are just as good as the characters, while others have a generic or just uninspired design. It feels like there's a strong theme for each area, but it comes across like a bit of the same kitchen sink approach of the world building. The first zone has evil witches dolls, forest inhabitants, and a couple of evil statues. The carnival has killer clowns, broken amusement rides, and Halloween characters. Why not? I've read the small lore tidbits in the glossary about each enemy and how it connects them to the zone they're in, but what enemies you will find still feels a bit arbitrary. This difference in designs leads to a less cohesive world, clawing its video game-esque nature back into the forefront. One thing Chrono Ark absolutely excels at is great feeling attacks. Having punchy and meaty attacks is not a requirement for the roguelite deck building genre, especially compared to other genres like action or fighting games. But Chrono Ark makes it a point to really nail this. There's a certain je ne sais quoi about it. You know it when you see it. The feel of attacks or actions is about wind up, the moment of impact, and follow through. It also comes down to the mechanical strength of the action as well. You could have the best, coolest animation, but if it does minimal damage, then it feels wrong. It's a difficult balancing act. I want to take a look at some examples, starting with low mana attacks. Look at the basic strike each character starts with. Simple, you hit them. It feels basic, standard, boring. It feels like you want these out of your deck as soon as possible. Here are some 1 mana attack cards. They have more personality than the basic attack, but are still quick and to the point. Now let's take a look at some of the 2 mana attack cards. They are more dramatic than their 1 mana counterparts, matching the increase in mechanical power. A little more wind-up, a bit more ending effects, more impact at the point of contact. On to 3 mana attacks. There's a huge wind-up, then a powerful hit at the point of contact. It's important that the animation does not end at the moment of contact giving that fluid follow-through needed to feel that hit. The aesthetic drama of the move matches the mechanical power, creating this perfect harmony. Ludonarrative resonance? I don't know the official term, but these attacks cause neurons to fire in my brain, making me go, hell yeah, when I play them. Look at this 4 mana instant kill card. Jesus, that's over the top anime bullshit, but it's also an instant kill. Recently, the developers have expanded on these attacks, portraying the characters actually attacking. While I know it's a single still image, 0 frames of animation, the correct timing and pose makes your mind fill in the gaps. It delivers such a powerful moment of impact, amplifying the feel of the attack. The sound design also excellently matches the attacks as well. While subtle in the moment-to-moment gameplay, you dramatically notice the difference with and without sound effects. Shout out to the animators and sound designers, as their work is incredibly important but always underappreciated. I understand why the roguelite deck builder genre skimps out on this part, as it requires a lot of work with animation, sound design, and mechanics to make attacks feel good. All of that work, and most people don't even notice it, but our brains do, subconsciously at least. These aspects of games is funny like that. This attention to detail elevates the card play, fully utilizing the digital media. Playing a powerful card is great. Playing a powerful card and feeling the impact is amazing. I appreciate the work I'll find studios put into this aspect. Speaking of cards, let's get into more characters. Trisha is an offense character all about critical hits and playing multiple cards. Trisha is a great example of why I like the character design of this game so much. She is a character archetype that has been seen before, a low HP, high damage assassin where you give her critical strike equipment and go to town. In a game with critical strike chance, you're going to see that type of character design as it's an obvious trope. Chrono Ark pushes beyond that trope and makes her toolkit just a little more interesting, just a little more weird. Trisha's passive, Double Team, causes Trisha to gain a focus stack every time she plays a card. Once she has 5 focus stacks, Double Team activates, causing the next card to cost 0 mana. Note, the important part here is it's not Trisha's next card. It's the next card you play. Because of this, you could play a high value heal or play a expensive attack card for a different character for free. This mechanic works so well with the concept of overload. The more cards you play with one character, the more expensive it is to play additional cards. Time Double Team correctly, and a powerful attack normally outside of your reach is discounted to 0 mana. Focus stacks stay between fights, letting you start the next fight with an early Double Team. This passive leads to massive swings, which feel so rewarding if you time them correctly. That being said, with up to 4 party members, and with the overload mechanic, playing 5 cards from one character is not easy. While she is a character focused on dealing damage, Trisha's toolkit also has a lot of utility that helps her speed up activating Double Team. She has cards that can be repeated multiple times, cards that draw other Trisha cards, and cards that copy your teammate's cards. These all expedite how fast you can use Double Team again. Because anyone can make use of Double Team, you can build Trisha to provide supplemental damage and utility, or you can lean into her being your main damage dealer and go ballistic. While my examples sound overly complex, Trisha's toolkit also works without focusing on maximizing Double Team. You don't need to be playing 5D chess every second. Sometimes it's just a nice bonus which makes you go, oh neat, look at that. Finally, I want to talk about Shadow Raid. It's a perfect example of this weird design. It's a 3-mana card which hits like a truck, converting any critical strike chance past 100% into critical strike damage. Here's the thing, if this is the only Trisha card in your hand, it gains 100% critical strike chance. Combine this with the increased critical strike chance of Trisha's other cards, and with crit focus equipment, it can do truly massive damage. This power is highly conditional though. It has a high mana cost, which is affected by overload, and a weird parameter for guaranteeing its crit. It's worth it, but can you set up your deck to activate Double Team, have no other Trisha cards in hand, and increase her critical strike chance? You don't need Double Team, but 3 mana before overload is a hefty price to pay. Plus, if you're trying to activate Double Team, you want as many Trisha cards as possible. That makes Shadow Raid almost self-defeating, since you don't get the extra damage if you have any other Trisha cards in hand. All of this deck building consideration is just for one card. And you can say, nah, Trisha's here to just cast a bunch of cheap cards and have somebody else make use of Double Team. I'm not putting in that work, and that's just fine. Her design is so multifaceted with only a small handful of cards, and this is just one character. You get up to 4 of these characters in your party. A+. Sizz is a support all about positioning her doll Eve correctly to help the party. Before we get into the mechanics, these scissors have to be the least practical weapon out of everyone in the cast. How does she use them in combat? Why is she holding them like that? Okay, mechanics. Her passive is all about moving her doll, Eve, around. Whenever you play a card or fixed ability targeting a party member, Eve floats over to them and gains a stack. Eve can have 2 of these stacks, and if the character holding Eve attacks, Eve also attacks, losing 1 stack. I love the idea behind her mechanics, carefully picking cards to get Eve ready to attack alongside your fighters, but I have to admit it's a lot of work. I always end up forgetting to position Eve correctly, or find myself in a situation where I need to attack then heal, messing up the Eve bonus attack. With previous characters, I've been applauding how these types of mechanics open up interesting design space, and while there is interesting design space here, a lot of the time with Sizz it feels like too much extra work for a meager amount of reward. Let's compare her passive to Azar's passive. Not a perfect comparison, but hear me out. Both an Illusion Sword and an Eve attack deal about the same amount of damage, except with Azar, you just play or exchange the top card of your hand to get an Illusion Sword and attack whoever you want with it. With Sizz's passive, Eve has to be on the right person by spending a card or fixed ability on them, making sure you have the card and mana to then attack with that character who has Eve, and then the attack is limited to if the person attacking can get past an enemy with taunt. All of that for 7 to 10 damage normally, which is not a lot. While there are good combo cards like Incise buffing Eve's damage and hindering attack, making the party member holding Eve always crit, I feel like it's a huge opportunity cost. Why not get another character with another attack, or easier to manage party buffs than go through this whole rigmarole with Eve? The combos are there if you're willing to put the work in, I'm just usually not. I tend to focus on cards that don't require Eve attacking, such as Collect Eve, which uses 2 Eve stacks for a shield and gives you 2 mana. However, these cards also create the opposite problem where you are then positioning Eve off the party member who attacks, which just feels wrong. Ugh. That's why my favorite card for Sizz is to just sacrifice Eve, throwing her at the enemies and watching her explode. You don't have to worry about positioning and synergy if there's no doll to position. Easy. Sorry, Eve. Also, side note, why does Eve have the ability to explode? Sizz even apologizes to Eve, like, lady, you made this doll. You don't have to put dynamite in it. In the end, Sizz has good, interesting design and can be very effective. She's just never my first choice. One of the main leaders of the investigation team, Leanne is a defense character who is a jack of all trades, with potent counterattacks. Leanne's passive, Grand Reflex, is simple. You play an attack with a countdown, and if the targeted enemy attacks your team before the countdown ends, Leanne parries the attack and immediately counterattacks. Block, counter. Easy. It's also one of those mechanics that just feels so good when it connects, a satisfying cling, then a massive bonk. You can feel the weight of her greatsword smashing down as you revel in your strategic genius. Unfortunately, that's not the full text of the passive. The full text reads, Leanne receives a parry buff every turn. When the target of Leanne's countdown skill attacks an ally, Leanne redirects the attack and immediately casts her skill. Parrying reduces all incoming damage by 35% and healing gauge cannot be reduced. If parry is successful, remove parry buff and gain 1 additional mana next turn. If Leanne did not parry for 1 turn, she receives 25% armor and healing gauge protection until the next received hit. Oh, that is way too wordy for something so easy to explain. It feels like one of those ideas that is good on paper, but then mechanically implementing it just became a mess. It does work, but it's not smooth, so just stick to my description. Other than counterattacks, what else does she have? Obviously she can deal decent damage. I mean, look at that greatsword. With area of effect attacks, stun, sweet debuffs, she puts in work on offense. She also has great utility, such as taking hits for allies, buffing other cards to have a 100% chance to crit, removing debuffs and sending them right back to the enemy. She reminds me the most of the Darkest Dungeon 2 Man-at-Arms. Just an absolute workhorse character who might not be the spotlight of the show, but can always fit in a lineup. Plus her counters are a fun puzzle to work around. Leanne strong, Leanne good. Huz is a support character who uses her healing whip to keep your team alive and apply weakening debuffs to the enemies. First off, yes, more whip characters. Is it a practical weapon? No, but there's a lady using a giant pair of scissors in this game, so whatever. Second off, I'm not going to yuck anyone's yums here, but I think they're leaning a bit too much on the bondage. Just a little bit too much. Third, I wouldn't say no. Huz is a healer and, surprise, surprise, whips hurt even if it is a quote-unquote healing whip. Mechanically, her healing cards leave debuffs called healing wounds. These cause a small amount of pain damage over time, but once it expires, you overheal by a larger amount than the debuff. Overhealing lets you heal past your healing gauge by the full amount. It's incredibly powerful as you don't have to deal with the pain of getting your health back to full. Also, if you hit 0 HP and have a healing wound debuff, it's removed and you are instantly healed, pushing the party member out from death's door. This makes her healing powerful, but kind of weird as it's best when someone's about to die or if they've taken actual damage past the healing gauge. The other half of her kit is based on weakening debuffs. While a support, Huz leans more on the offense side than other support characters. She has respectable attack cards which have debuffs lowering the enemy's armor, evasion, critical chance, etc. These debuffs are strong, but I tend to incorrectly undervalue them as they are all under the hood mechanics. Armor, evasion, accuracy, critical strike chance are all important, almost more important than the immediate effects of what your cards are doing, but it's hard to see the effects those stats provide. Removing 33% of the enemy's armor translates to dealing way more damage than you think. You can even get armor into the negatives, adding even more damage. That's great, but let's compare two hypothetical cards. They deal the same amount of damage, have the same mana cost, but the first one lowers the enemy's armor by 33%, and the second one draws a card. Negative 33% armor a lot of the times is straight up better than drawing a card, but I'm always going to go with the card draw as I can visually see and feel the effect. I think it's a UI issue. I'm a big fan of how Slay the Spire displays this. In Slay the Spire, if the enemy is taking 50% more damage, your attack cards display the normal damage and then the increased damage when targeting the enemy. The same applies if you weaken the enemy's attack. The cards which affect stats show that change so you know that the effect is both happening and worthwhile. I'm not a UI designer, but I feel like this is an area Chrono Ark could improve on. Rant aside, with weakening debuffs on the enemy, Huz gains access to powerful cards like Crack and Rabbit Doll MVP. I like the design of these cards, which trigger from broad effects such as any weakening debuff, as it extends the combo potential outside of the one character. Maybe you have another character supply the debuff and have Huz combo with it. There are a couple of equipment, potions, and relics that also provide weakening debuffs. These could trigger those cards. This broad design allows multiple choices on how you want to accomplish the combo, and the intermixing of characters is what really makes deck building in Chrono Ark so electrifying. Finally, Huz's passive is called Restraint. If the enemy is going to act first when a turn starts, Huz can stop them. It costs 1 mana and deals a small amount of damage. It's a weird passive, since getting any speed stat increases will basically make this useless as you always go first. It took me a long time playing with Huz to realize that this is not a passive to use against random encounters. This passive is almost exclusively for boss fights. Many boss fights have actions that will always go first no matter how much speed you have. Restraint is specifically to mitigate these instances, giving you time to set up barriers or possibly stun the boss. It's niche, but can absolutely save your bacon in those hard boss fights. Overall, Huz is one of my favorite supports. Her toolkit takes a bit to get used to, but she is worth putting in the effort to make her work. Keep in mind the best use case for her is both healing and damages/debuff. While you could only use her healing or damage cards, you are not going to get the most out of Huz without having both. Silverstein is an offense character with a focus on single target damage. His passive name is Sports, which is a military acronym for Slap, Pull, Observe, Release, Tap, and Shoot. Really, it's an acronym for when your rifle stops firing, which does not line up with his passive all about shooting additional times, but whatever. I mostly like yelling "Sports" when I trigger the effect. When you play a single target card on the enemy, they gain a mark of Silverstein. Play another single target card on the same enemy, and Silverstein will shoot them twice with a secondary fire. Half of Silverstein's attack cards also add special bullets, which increase the effectiveness of the next secondary fire. For example, Double Tap shoots 3 times instead of 2 times, and Grape Shot Blast shoots all enemies when triggered. The other half of Sports is if you shoot 6 bullets with his secondary fire, you reload, drawing an attack card so you can keep on shooting. Because of this design of these special bullet cards, you kind of want to go all in on Silverstein. Playing more Silverstein cards scales his effectiveness on 3 axes at the same time. Obviously, you deal damage with his attack cards. Then those cards scale the secondary fire effects, and then finally you also get to draw cards for using the secondary fire effect. This design feels less intricate compared to other offense characters. Part of it, I feel, is due to the bonus of the secondary fire going away with the mark of Silverstein. For the most part, playing double tap into Grape Shot Blast will produce the same results as Grape Shot Blast into double tap. Compare it to something like Azar generating Illusion Swords to combo with his cards, or Trisha's Double Team, and you can see what I'm talking about. It turns into play shoot card to shoot enemy. The other half of his design is about using as many cards as possible in a single turn. Cards like Quickfire cause Silverstein to shoot the marked enemy with his secondary fire every time any card is played, and Aim Straight increases how much damage enemies take from this secondary fire. I like the design of these cards a lot because Silverstein can produce damage when he isn't the main focus. It's more interesting than use shoot card to shoot enemy. Despite seeming straightforward, there's a lot more to Silverstein's design than at first glance. Cards like Drum Shot can be abused as a combo piece, and he has decent utility. He is the only offense character with a bona fide stun. He takes a bit of finesse to get the most out of his kit, but I still like his design. Also, sports! Narhan is the master of crowd control. He is a defense character focused on enemy disruption and barriers. His passive, Psychometry, not only grants a small bonus to hit and crit, but lets you see who the enemy will attack next. Being able to see your enemy's intentions has been a genre standard established by Slay the Spire. While some people like being able to see the enemy's actions as the default, I believe the design comes down to telegraphing attacks and fairness. There are enough considerations in Chrono Ark's design to make the lack of information still fair. For example, you have the healing gauge allowing a character to take a hit and still be healed before losing their HP. If you end the battle with healing gauge left, you recover that amount. You can always see when the enemy is going to strike, and even if you take a huge hit, you always go to Death's Door first. In fact, multiple weak attacks in a row are almost scarier than one massive hit. Without being able to see exactly what the enemy is going to do, it increases the fuzziness you have to deal with. You don't know who will be attacked and by how much, so you have to ask yourself who is more important to protect. Do you save mana for healing in between attacks? Sometimes hitting the hourglass to wait allows you to react in between attacks or get the most value from your healing cards. With Narhan's ability to see who the enemy will strike next, it gives you better information to make those decisions. Being preemptive is always stronger than being reactive. Let's talk about defensive layers. This is Narhan's specialty. Defensive layers are different ways to mitigate damage. While healing is powerful in this game, there are multiple ways to stop enemy damage. First, and most importantly, the best way to mitigate damage is to kill the enemy. A dead enemy can't attack you. 100% damage mitigated. Next is to stun the enemy. The ability to stop the enemy from taking actions is stronger than any healing spell, and Narhan has a plethora of options for this. Sleep takes the enemy out of combat for multiple turns, and Paranoia can stun multiple enemies. Unfortunately, you can't easily stun lock enemies forever. Once they are stunned and they recover, they gain a buff resisting stuns for some time. Luckily, Narhan has a card called Brain Lock, which is an uncounterable stun. So after stuns, you want to look towards barriers. Similar to block and slay the spire, barriers are temporary HP pools. A lot of the times, these are stronger than healing in Chrono Ark, as they can go above your current life pool and help negate damage to the healing gauge. Narhan's card, the Mentalist, puts a huge barrier on a single target, and with Cold Hearted, you can save your team from death's door. While barriers eventually go away, with
Psychometry,
you can make full use of these barriers by knowing who will be attacked next. Finally, once you have been hit, then you turn to healing. While there are some other minor mechanics like armor and evasion, that's the general flow of defense. Narhan might not have true healing power, but the amount of damage mitigation he can provide is staggering. I recommend using Narhan for his damage mitigation and powerful debuffs rather than his attacks. His attacks are not bad, and they scale with his max health instead of attack power, but they're more niche. If you want a defense character with stronger attacks, there are a lot better choices. Let's take another break from characters and talk about out-of-combat gameplay. Between fights, you are managing your inventory, encountering random events, and getting loot. Standard stuff for the genre. Breaking away from the genre convention, you have free control of where Lucy goes, letting you encounter enemies, events, and treasures in whatever order you want. It's not true freedom, as enemies usually block your path to the rest of the map, but still more freedom than most of these types of games. Even after defeating the boss, you can go back and check out events or use a key for that last piece of treasure. The only time you have to say goodbye is when you're advancing to the next area. This open design reminds me more of classic dungeon crawlers than the current roguelite trend of an ever-forward, mildly branching path. I tend to like the open design better as it's harder to optimize. With this branching path, there is always an optimal path to take. I mean, I'm not the only one who thinks that. I recently read a paper on machine learning for Slay the Spire, also trying to figure out optimal paths. I acknowledge there is a great skill as a player for deciding the correct path. Feel free to disagree with me on this, but I feel this design bogs down the pacing of the game. At the start of each zone, you look at all of your options carefully, deciding on what would give you the highest chance of success. Once your path is picked, that's it. You follow it to the end. Because you know what is optimal, there's no point in deviating off the path unless something went horribly wrong. All of your decisions are pre-made at the start. Chrono Ark has an optimal path, of course, but it's more nebulous what that path is. Maybe going to every event first is optimal, except A, you can't because baddies are blocking the path, and B, while you always can leave events and come back to them, you are stuck between two options when creating the event. You can't unmake an event, so you have to make a definitive choice. If you pick an event to exchange a relic for another relic or two keys, that's great. But that event is only worth picking if you have a relic in your inventory. Do you pick this event in advance, hoping to get a relic in this area? Do you take that risk? Then what about the other way, fighting everything and then shopping and events? While you would choose the best options for the events, you would miss out on the small but noticeable power boosts you get from these events. Getting potions or items help you gear up for the difficult boss ahead. Buying a skill book from the shop to replace a basic skill might be the power boost you need. Then, not surprisingly, the ideal path is somewhere in between. A big gray area where you have to navigate it based on what you feel is correct at that moment. Unlike Slay the Spire, because the map is not visible at the start, you can't plan your optimal path. It's your choice when to engage the content. You could play it safe, or end up with events and enemies you are not ready for. After each area, you get to a campfire, where you can heal, smith equipment, upgrade cards, and recruit party members. is the much needed downtime after a difficult boss fight. With healing items like bread being relatively common, it's easy to overheal your party back to full HP. A bad draw here or a lucky crit there isn't going to be debilitating to your long-term health pool. The free upgrades and equipment smithing boosts your power level, preparing you for the next spike in difficulty. I want to talk about recruiting as it's brilliant. One of the best decisions design-wise in Chrono Ark is that you only get 4 new party members to choose from. There seems to be rules in place, so if you have 2 offense characters, you won't only get offense characters to recruit. Choosing to recruit a character is a big decision, and not knowing if you will get what you want, or if they will fit with your party, forces you to pivot and consider each option. Limitation breeds creativity. Other times you get the exact person you need to make your team click. With the ability to pick 2 characters at the start, you can still get that juicy synergy that you're building your deck around, so you're not without some say in the matter. Also, you don't even need to pick a character. You can just stick with a team of 3 or even 2 investigators, albeit with a limited maximum mana. What you trade for not recruiting an extra party member is consistency. The less characters in your party, the smaller your deck is, and the more powerful your synergies are. You'll be drawing the same cards more often, and each piece of equipment is more effective. But obviously having less people means more concentrated damage from the enemies, and overall more limited synergies. There is a friendship system in Chrono Ark in which you give gifts to the investigators. You gain these gifts after defeating bosses or by purchasing them at the Ark for credits. Once you give enough gifts to an investigator, you get a cutscene with them in which you learn about their personalities, their past, and their motivations. I like this system a lot because it gives you actual character moments with your party members. It's hard to have connection to individual characters when there's a cast of 20, but these friendship events gives you that connection. Mechanically speaking, when you increase a party member's friendship level high enough or give them one of their favorite gifts, you get to select additional cards when they level up. This is great for getting a key card needed for your deck. Other than unlocking a character, this friendship system isn't really required, but it's still enjoyable nonetheless. Speaking of characters, let's go back to some more characters. Charon is a dark priest not bound by morals or ethics. Shout out to the one guy who got that reference. As an offense character, Charon focuses on damage over time and hurting her team for power. Charon has strong damage over time cards, and cards that combo with enemies currently suffering from said damage over time. Quick aside about damage over time in this game. I appreciate that there are hard caps for how many stacks of a single damage over time you can get. It leaves for more breathing room for direct damage cards to be effective. If damage over time could be stacked infinitely, the best strategy hands down would be to get 4 characters with different damage over time effects, and then go full defense. I only wish that they told you during the tutorial that each damage over time effect has a hard cap, but whatever. Because damage over time takes, well, time to deal damage, these cards are best when you have a deck more focused on defense. While there are mechanics to prevent you from only playing defense, such as the Black Fog, you can do a pretty good job in protecting your party to let your damage over time run its course. The other half of Charon's toolkit is dealing damage to your teammates. Okay, more than just hurting your teammates. You get cool effects such as huge barriers, huge damaging attacks, huge oh no, I killed Charon. Not surprisingly, you need to manage your teammates' life and healing gauge correctly, or you're going to suffer. Similar to Hein, it's about managing your risk and knowing when to heal. Speaking of which, Charon's passive gives you an item called the Soul
Durable,
which allows you to get free healing anytime. Spend 1 charge and get 1 heal. You get more charges by killing enemies or playing specific Charon cards. Use this to counter the self-inflicted damage or in case of emergencies. Overall, not a complex character, but a very fun character to play nonetheless. Johann is an offense character all about using his fixed ability. Right up front, I appreciate the audacity of using a bow when military-grade firearms exist in this world. If this was 14th century Italy where guns were pretty shitty, then yeah, bows are a good alternative. But with modern assault rifles, shotguns, and sniper rifles, bows are a wild choice, Johann. Some real video game logic here. Anyways, Johann's main mechanic is that his fixed ability is a 1 mana attack called Close Range Shot. You can't change this fixed ability, it is always Close Range Shot. It costs 1 mana, does mediocre damage, but if you play a card that starts in your deck, which costs mana, you get to use Close Range Shot again. Pew pew. Use 2 close range shots and you get 1 mana back. 2 attacks for 1 mana? What a deal! I want to go back to the discussion on value versus tempo again, as Johann is a character that relies on value. Because every 2 close range shots only cost 1 mana, you are essentially getting free attacks every turn. While they're not as strong as normal attack cards, they only cost mana. I need to stress that these attacks take no cards. Anyone who has played Hearthstone or games with these non-card mechanics understand how much value you can generate with cardless abilities. However, this is terrible tempo. The faster you kill the enemy, the better, and a close range shot is weaker than a basic attack. Even if you use multiple close range shots in a turn and get those sweet discounts, you will always have more tempo using that mana to play cards instead. So how do you leverage this extreme value? If you want to go all in on close range shot, then you need to adjust how you evaluate cards you want to include in your deck. You want to get cheap 1 mana cards, as each card you play on your turn means you get an extra close range shot. Characters that generate cards from outside your deck are less ideal, as those new cards don't refresh close range shot. You can abuse cards that refund themselves to squeeze even more close range shots in a turn. Apply buffs to Johann such as Burning Arrow or Mirage, and slap some on-hit effects, and now he's cooking. When deck building, you have to really ask yourself, can you fit a sweet 3 mana card in your deck? How many close range shots do you lose from the extra mana spent? Is it worth the loss of value? This one fixed ability changes the fundamental question of value versus tempo, and I think that's pretty neat. All of that is if you truly care about optimizing that one aspect of him. Johann has more to him than just close range shot. A lot of his cards apply to all fixed abilities, rather than just close range shot. For example, Mirage makes all of your character's fixed abilities cast twice. Do you leverage that with a powerful 3 mana fixed ability instead of close range shot? Johann has cards that rely on hand size as well, meaning you can combo with a draw engine or with characters like Azar generating a bunch of illusion swords in a turn. Close range shot does not work well with created cards, but Tempest dealing damage per card in hand absolutely does. Maybe you use close range shot to plug in holes in your mana when it's wonky. Maybe you can save using a card this turn by shooting twice with Johann. Small efficiencies which add up over time. As I said with Trisha, you get 4 of these weird characters with deck building quirks to work with. Johann is another great example of the designers creating characters with huge deck building considerations and such few cards. A+. Fine, okay, I'll talk about the bird. Phoenix is weird. I've talked about other characters being a touch weird. Maybe characters can be medium weird, but Phoenix is full-on weird. Like dating your ex's dad weird. I've never seen a character like Phoenix in a deck builder, and probably won't again. And yes, they do have their own theme song. So take everything we've talked about, throw it out the window. Phoenix does not have the healing gauge mechanic. When they get hit, their HP goes down like a normal RPG character. Once their HP hits 0 and they're attacked again, they don't die. Phoenixes are immortal, and when this one is quote-unquote mortally wounded, they just get hangry. Once hangry, Phoenix will refuse to do anything when you play their cards, and other times they'll take a bite out of your teammates. While immortal, if your other teammates are killed in combat, Phoenix will just up and leave, even if they're at full HP. This bird ain't loyal. Without the healing gauge mechanic, you can go through the painstaking process of trying to overheal Phoenix back to full HP, but there's a better way. Bread. This character is fundamentally, mechanically, intrinsically based on bread. Bread is a normal healing item you use to heal characters outside of combat. Birds love bread, and phoenixes are birds. Ergo, by the transitive property of equality, phoenixes love bread. Give Phoenix a loaf of bread and bam! 60% of their health is recovered. After eating bread, they are no longer hungry and are back in the fight. Delicious. Phoenix's passive, Phoenix Might, is like Johan's passive where it replaces their fixed ability and can't be changed. Good news, you can use it to eat bread. It costs 0 mana and you can eat 1 bread. That's value. What am I doing with my life? Okay, cards. Phoenix is a defense character in the loosest sense of the word. I feel like the designers were throwing deck building spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck, put those cards together into one character, and called it good. I know there is more to Phoenix than that, and there are internal and external synergies, but boy, what the hell are these cards? You have cards such as Fiery Wings, an attack card with okay damage. It has the text that if you don't kill an enemy with this attack, it heals all other enemies 80 HP? What? Why? Fiery Wings also adds a new option to Phoenix Might when you play it, allowing you to draw your last discarded card instead of eating bread. For 50 gold. What? Why? You're part of the party, Phoenix. Why are you withholding cards for money? This bird ain't loyal. You can get a card literally called Efficient Use of Bread, which doesn't do anything. It literally says that this card has no effect when cast. It costs 0 mana, and it can't be exchanged to draw a new card. When you draw it, all you can do is play it to discard it. However, the card gives 2 new options for Phoenix's Might. Find bread and throw bread. Phoenix can now find bread and throw bread. That's efficient, all right. I could do this with every Phoenix card. Each card is just absurd. What do you do with this character? I don't know. But I think there's more to Phoenix than just being a joke character. It's the designers saying, how far can we push a character in this system? How weird can we go? And for that, I think this character is great. Can I play this character well? Absolutely not. Do I love this character? Absolutely yes. Ilya is an offense character focused on discarding cards and hand management. I love Ilya. He's my boy. He's my bae. He's my love. He's my favorite character. So accept that there's gonna be some bias here. This is a biased review of Chrono Ark, but expect even less integrity from me. Ilya has everything I like in a character. He looks slick, he's a depressed alcoholic, and he's one of the most mechanically interesting characters in this game. I would top or bottom for this man. So let's get into him. The mechanics, not the man. Ilya's main mechanic is called Sheath. If you discard a card with Sheath, you also activate the sheath effect. Discard card, do cool effect. Some of these are nice side effects like apply a frostbite debuff. Other times you literally play the card. Sometimes sheath effects are even better than playing the card normally. Lightning Slash Draw is a great example. If you discard this card, you play the card, dealing damage, and then return it back into your hand. Holy shit, that is a 0 mana, 0 card, deal damage. The value and the tempo from that is just so juicy. There's a catch though. By default, there are no normal ways to discard cards. At first I thought you could just discard cards with the free discard and draw you get per turn, but the official wording on that mechanic is exchange. Technically not discard, so that option is out. So how the hell do you discard cards? That's where Ilya's passive comes in. At level 2, you gain 3 uses of Ilya's vodka. One use of this vodka upgrades another party member's card to discard cards along with their normal effects. However, you can only discard the top or bottom card of your hand. Uh-oh, suddenly there's a problem. These effects are not simply pick a card and discard it. Oh no, you have to position the card in your hand correctly to actually make these sheath effects happen. Now there's another layer of complexity to combat, as the position of the cards in your hand matter. Cards only change position by playing, discarding, or exchanging them. How do you go about navigating your hand of cards to activate Ilya's sheath abilities? Card positioning is not just in the UI anymore, it's now a core mechanic to piloting your deck successfully. Fortunately, Ilya has a couple of cards that also discard other cards when played. Unfortunately, it only discards a card if that card is the last Ilya card in your hand. More conditionals! The other half of this equation is that discarding cards without sheath effects is pretty bad on its own. Sure, your upgraded cards cost less mana, or draw another card after discarding, but when you run into situations where you want to play a card you need right now, but you discard a card you don't want to discard, what do? It's quite the pickle. While other deck builders have discard mechanics like this, what makes Ilya's toolkit sing is the fact that you only have a very specific way to discard cards. If you could pick any card to discard, then it becomes draw combo piece A and combo piece B, have both in hand, and use A to discard B. That's a more consistent and powerful design, but less interesting overall. It's a lot of work, but why I love Ilya is the work is worth it. First, they did a good job on the presentation level of having no downtime between playing a card and the sheath effect going off, making it feel quick and snappy. Because I'm a dork, I can imagine Ilya slashing twice and slowly sheathing his katanas. Other than aesthetics, it's also incredibly powerful. You could play none of Ilya's cards, and through discarding, have Ilya still be your main damage dealer. In a Slay the Spire type game, you could theoretically win by never spending mana on your main win condition. That's just so weird and amazing. When I started to use Ilya, it dawned on me that there are a bunch of cards I've been playing with which are good but have a downside of discarding cards. Do they work with Ilya? Yes. Yes, they do. How about discard your bottom card to draw 3 cards? How about doing that and then stabbing somebody? Deal damage per card in hand and discard 2 cards? How about that? And stabbing somebody. I'll become a broken record if I continue, but this sheath mechanic can turn downsides into upsides, altering how you evaluate cards you add to your deck. It takes a fundamental aspect of playing cards and flips it on its head. I've stated that I like characters that change how you build a deck, and Ilya is one of my favorites in that aspect. I love him and would run away with him if I could. S-rank character. Helia and Selena. Sun and Moon. These twin sisters work together, with Helia on offense and Selena taking support. We are once again approaching moderately weird design here, as these sisters are a pair. You can't recruit one without the other. Their cards directly reference mechanics from each other, and both of their passive abilities allow them to take hits for each other when one is at death's door. BFFs for life. Welcome to the true deck manipulation characters. The twins have cards which reference the top of your deck, the bottom of your deck, the top of your discard pile, etc., etc. The position of your deck and discard pile make or break how powerful their cards are. Playing the twins well is determined by how good you are at manipulating these factors. Example: Helia's Solar Bolt is an attack that does pretty good damage. Downside, it is 4 mana. Ouch! However, after playing Solar Bolt, you can look at the top card of your deck and get a mana refund based on the mana cost of that top card. Have a 2 mana card on top of your deck? Solar Bolt gives you 2 mana back. Have a 4 mana card on top of your deck? That Solar Bolt was free, baby! Another example. Selena's Shooting Star is an attack that deals moderate damage when you play it. On its own, it's mediocre for a 2 mana card. But wait, there's more. Shooting Star then repeats based on the mana cost of the top card of your discard pile. These repeats have the added benefit of also healing your party. That's way better than a standard 2 mana card. You can see the internal combos start to click. Take just those 2 cards we talked about. You play a 4 cost Solar Bolt. You have a 4 mana card on top of your deck, making that Solar Bolt cost 0 mana. It's now the top card of your discard pile. Play Shooting Star, and you're guaranteed to get those extra repeats. That sequence only costs 2 mana, but its value is probably worth 6 to 7 mana. Most of the twins' cards are like that. Weak if played by itself, but extremely powerful under the right circumstances. You can try to guess what the top card of your deck is, but that's rolling dice at that point. This is why the twins have a number of cards, such as Flame Eruption or Radiant Moonlight, to get the right card to the right location of your deck to do your combo. For those with big brains with many wrinkles, they are powerful keystones of your party. I am but a humble small smooth brain, and I always have a hard time with deck manipulation characters. I'm juggling enough already. Remembering the order of my deck or discard is just one step too many. Anytime there are artifacts or relics in these types of games that let you see how your deck is arranged, I pass on them. They're insanely powerful, as being preemptive is always better than being reactive. But I can't even remember the next card in my deck, let alone how my entire deck is laid out. Point being, if you're good at this aspect of these deck building games, you will be good with the twins, as you can get some truly nasty combos. Take Blessing of the Moon. It applies a buff to a card, causing the buffed card to repeat when played. Put that on Solar Bolt, and set a 4-cost card on top of your deck. Solar Bolt casts twice, giving you 2 refunds. Surprise, surprise, you now have 4 more mana than when you started. You can hurt the enemy and gain mana. That's not how card games work. Because of their mechanics and how you recruit them, you really have to view them as a single party member. When you select them, you're only getting 3 puzzle pieces rather than 4. It's not inherently bad, but weirdly I wish that they were 2 separate characters. Aesthetically, it's a slam dunk. Sun and moon motifs, their eyes matching their sister's primary color, their outfits reflect Helia's spunkiness and Selena's shyness. They are powerful together, and their cards themselves are interesting little puzzles like all of my favorite Chrono Ark characters. But design-wise, does breaking these synergies in half and then forcing them together into two characters really add anything? In Chrono Ark, you're basically trying to find these types of synergies when you play the game normally. For example, Charon can easily put a character at death's door. Certain characters like Hein and Huz have cards that interact with characters at death's door. Trisha's Shadow Raid deals bonus damage from excess critical strike chance. Leanne and Sis have ways of giving 100% critical strike chance to attacks. How are the twins' intertwined synergy any different from these synergies? Helia and Selena being forced together feels kind of limiting. For example, some of the twins' cards reference specifically the Solar Flame debuff and the Lunar Curtain buff. But does making those two effects more specific increase design space? These buffs/debuffs work with other party members, but they're about as third as powerful. Why would you give 2/3 of the power when you can get the specific combo effects the cards are designed for? When you always have Helia and Selena's cards as options, why would you pick a less good option? With the twins only being recruitable at the start, you also lose the joy of being able to recruit them later. Building a party and ultimately your deck is impacted dramatically by not knowing who you will have as your third and fourth party member. If you're going full damage over time, but you have to choose from 4 people without damage over time effects, you have a conundrum. How much more do you commit to your damage over time strategy? Do you pivot? With the limited recruiting of the twins, you don't get that choice, and you don't get to choose them later. You can never pivot into Helia or Selena. If you pick them at the start, you always know what kind of deck you will be building. One of the strengths of deck builders where you take half, third, or quarter decks and mash them together is mixing groups of characters and seeing how their cards work together. My math could be wrong here, but there are over 100,000 combinations of investigators your party could have in it. Granted, it's not ideal to have 4 healers, or maybe it is. Who knows? I haven't played 100,000 games of Chrono Ark despite the length of this video essay. The feeling that I get playing the twins is an opportunity lost for the design space of these two characters separated. I don't think the designers would separate these characters, as them being together is their whole shtick, but with the Steam Workshop being implemented, I would love a mod splitting these two characters apart. Being able to see a party with Helia or Selena and 3 other characters would be really interesting. Plus, then you could recruit them later in your run, adding more variety. When you recruit Helia, how would her big mana cards fit in? Did you already grab a bunch of cheap cards? How would her damage for every buff you apply also fit in? If Selena's your only choice for a healer, how do you make her work? Do you have good cards to discard for her combos? How do you leverage her deck manipulation? All of these interesting and juicy deck building considerations are lost with these restrictions on how you recruit them. Alright, I'll get off my soapbox now. Helia and Selena are a joy to play with, and once you wrap your head around how their cards work, they can do some truly devastating combos. Hey! Who let the VTuber in? So Momori is a defense character focusing on absorbing damage and manipulating taunt statuses on enemies. As the last character added to the game, she is predictably one of the most complicated. I'll try to break it down to something easier to understand. Momori's passive, Inner Desire, negates 40% of non-pain damage your party takes. Right up front, that's wild. That's the equivalent of passively giving your entire team 40% armor. That's equivalent to turning a teammate's 30 HP into 42 HP. It more than doubles your party's effective HP pool. Because it's a passive, the only opportunity cost is putting Momori into your party. While this is insanely powerful, there's a catch. That 40% of damage isn't erased. Instead, all of that negated damage will eventually hit Momori. Once a party member is hit, a new card is added to your hand called Inner Desire. This card stores how much damage has been negated from hits, and once played or discarded, it will then deal all of that stored damage to Momori. Unfortunately, the card always will be discarded in 2 turns, since it was created, and you can't exchange it. This is really bad. If left unmanaged, her passive alone will kill Momori. There's a hot potato in your hand, and you have to do something about it. That's where Momori's other cards come into play. These cards can help manipulate Inner Desire to not just flat out kill her. I apologize in advance, as Momori has the worst card names in the game. For example, you have cards like Loser Detected, which can lower the stored damage on Inner Desire, or Loser Loser, even removing Inner Desires from your hand. With these cards, you can truly erase that 40% of negated damage. Or, you could turn to the dark side and give into Momori's Inner Desire. Cards like Momori Healing recovers all healing gauges to full, turning that healed amount into stored damage. Momori Crash is an AoE attack that can be repeated, adding more stored damage per repeat. From this, you can combo with cards such as Become Flat Pyong, dealing double the stored damage on all Inner Desires to the enemy. Unlimited power. As long as Momori doesn't die, of course. Playing Momori correctly is a balancing act of when to build or negate damage from her Inner Desire. Momori is effective. The numbers on her passive don't lie. While her damage can be great, it's tricky to build around as it's highly conditional. Because Inner Desire discards after 2 rounds, you don't have much breathing room to assemble the perfect combo. Compare it to a card like Ironheart's Shield Bash. If you want, you can hold on to Shield Bash until you have other heal cards or barrier cards to play along with it, and combo it for huge damage. With Momori, you need to raise the stored damage of Inner Desire up, hit hard, and then also mitigate the pain damage from her Inner Desire so she doesn't die. All in 1 to 2 turns. It's not impossible, but it's unreliable. She is much better served as a team player. Absorb damage passively, mitigate the stored damage, and hit hard when you can. She has some amazing synergies with certain party members, and because Inner Desire are cards being added to your hand, she works well for large hand-sized decks, or decks focused on playing multiple cards in a turn. Like all of these more complex characters, it takes some time to get used to her playstyle, but she can be a powerful member of your team. So I've been lying about what's been going on. What I've said about the plot is true. Black Fog destroyed the world, Lucy is the chosen one, Clock Tower, final hope, etc. But I've been leaving out important details. And lying by omission is still lying. There have been strange happenings going on. The opening scene with Azar waking Lucy up is not how the game starts, but after you fail your first run. As you fail, there's a counter ticking up. 499 to 500, 500 to 501. As you are playing the game, you get this feeling that things are just not what they seem. In between runs, Lucy can go to sleep in her room. As she dreams, you get access to old data files. Some are pictures, audio logs, cutscenes of past events. Why are there old photos and logs of Lucy being with these investigators she just met? Who are these people? What is truly going on? This is your last chance to pull back. Alright, let's get into this matryoshka of suffering that is the plot of Chrono Ark. Each layer unpacked intensifies the cruelty until only a black core of darkness is left. After defeating the final boss of Whitegrave, Lucy grabs the last Time Shard. Lucy and the investigation team succeed in their goal to save humanity. As the party approaches the clock tower, they express their hopes and dreams once they go back in time, before the Black Fog, before humanity was destroyed. The final moment of triumph. Lucy uses the Time Shard and activates the clock tower. Time starts to rewind, but nothing changes. The exact same run counter increases. Lucy is awoken by Azar again to begin her quest to activate the clock tower. Even when activating the clock tower, they are all stuck in a loop. Lucy remembers a memory that was buried deep within her subconscious. The counter ticks down from 500 to 12. Lucy is with Azar, Hein, and Leanne, having a good time. Lucy is upbeat and chipper as they grab the first Time Shard. Suddenly, the witch boss appears. Just like when you fight her, she forces Lucy to curse her allies with agonizing pain. Leanne demands to take every single curse, even if it would kill her. Lucy listens to Leanne, and after multiple curses, Lucy watches Leanne die right in front of her. Lucy panics and literally starts shaking. Poor kid. Azar gives less than stellar reassurance, telling Lucy that Leanne wasn't going to make it anyways, and to focus on defeating the boss. You know your reassurance is bad when Hein, the guy obsessed with blood and killing, is telling you to read the room, Azar. Watching her friends die is just too much for Lucy to bear. Lucy is truly paralyzed with fear. Hein sees this and starts to take initiative and fights on his own. Hein is attacking out of order, with no regards to mana, however he pleases. Azar cannot have this. In a single slash, Azar cuts Hein in half. As Hein's dismembered body hits the ground, Lucy goes into shock. Azar informs her that combat decisions are made by Lucy and only by Lucy. She is the Girl of Prophecy, and she will be the one to guide the investigators to victory. This truth is written into the very fabric of the world, and Hein? Well, Hein was out of line. Lucy cannot grow as a leader if Hein, Lian, or any other investigator acts without her command. This is a game to Azar, and Lucy simply needs to get good. Let me be clear, the world that exists for Lucy, Azar, and everyone else you've encountered, is a video game. A video game Azar helped to build. This run, was an absolute failure, as Lucy couldn't make up her mind. But hopefully she will be slightly better in the next run. That is, of course, the point of the roguelite genre, isn't it? While Hein and Lian are dead, soon the video game world will restart from the beginning, and Lucy will start again in her quest to activate the clock tower. Hein and Lian will be alive, and everyone will forget what happened. Except Azar, of course. Azar made sure to keep his memories in between each loop. He'll keep being the mentor towards Lucy, guiding her, shaping her, molding her to his own goals. Lucy doesn't keep her memories, but subconsciously retains the experience of battle. This explains why she transforms from an innocent child in Run 12 to a video game protagonist by Run 500. Cold, emotionless, empty. Azar walks away from this battle, leaving Lucy to join Hein and Lian. He'll see her again in Run 13. Azar is a very bad anime boy. So how did we get here? How did we get to this looping virtual video game world? Let's start from the beginning. Now there's a new intro. On Earth, there was a sudden ecological disaster, which blocked out the sun, ushering in a new ice age. Temperatures on Earth will become sub-zero, and over time humanity will freeze to death. A group of scientists came together to try to save humanity. They developed the Ark project. 600 people will be cryogenically frozen to wait out the ecological disaster. There are no exact estimates on when Earth will return to normal. It could be hundreds, if not thousands of years. The entire time, the people in the Ark project will sleep, while their consciousness is uploaded to a virtual world. They wait as the rest of humanity freezes to death. It's important to know that this virtual world did not start as a fantasy video game. In some of the past documents, you find out Klein, the head director of the project, and Lucy's father, engineered the Ark project to have a realistic virtual world to train the couple hundred survivors on how to rebuild civilization once they leave the Ark project. These people were comprised of the Ark project researchers and those wealthy enough to buy their way in. They're going to need survival, crafting, and general civilization building skills. They might as well learn those skills while they wait for the Ice Age to end. This world was based on an MMO Azar was working on, and it would not have been possible without Azar's cooperation. While the project started off just fine, there was growing discontent. An unnamed betrayer told the people in the Ark project the awful truths of the project, including that Klein added a protocol to erase everyone's memories and loop the virtual world. This betrayer rallied a resistance to Klein. There was chaos and bloodshed. Klein and Phoenix, his right-hand person, tried to stop the rebellion. Yes, that Phoenix, the deck-building spaghetti character based on eating bread, is one of the most pivotal characters in Chrono Ark. Klein and Phoenix are able to stop the chaos by executing a protocol to freeze everyone else in the Ark project. Now, as the only two people left awake, Klein mournfully declares to Phoenix that the virtual world was a failure. Yet, the Ark project still must go on. Due to the estimate time for the Ice Age to end, Klein and Phoenix also decide to be frozen. As Klein enters a 150-year sleep, Phoenix has an error. They cannot sync with their human body because their avatar does not match. Unable to revert to their former body without Klein's help, Phoenix decides to wait it out. Over the next 150 years, Phoenix keeps themselves busy playing games, learning to paint, and flying around the place. After all of this time, Phoenix wants to check on the frozen betrayer, and soon finds out that they have also been awake, trapped in their jail cell, waiting. Phoenix, happy to have any real interaction after 150 years of solitude, decides to talk with them. Even though the betrayer ruined the Ark project, they offer something to Phoenix that Klein could not: eternal life. To Phoenix, immortality in a virtual world is still immortality. I can't blame them. It is a tantalizing offer. Jumping ahead, as there's no in-game footage of this, Phoenix makes a deal with the betrayer and turns on Klein. This bird ain't loyal. They concoct a scheme to get Azar on board to help rewrite the Ark project. I'll explain more on that later. Sorry. Azar wants a world where people are fighting together for a common cause, and he has a chip on his shoulder against Klein. Also more on that later. Sorry. They use the master program, basically admin privileges, to rewrite the Ark projects to the continuously looping video game world that we have seen, catching us up to present day. Phoenix gets their internal life, and also keeps their memory between loops. Azar can have everyone band together for a common goal. As an MMO designer, Azar wants to watch people work together and improve to truly have mastery over the game. He picked Klein's daughter, Lucy, to be the main character of this new video game. To make it interesting, Azar made it so Lucy keeps some of her memories, or at least the gut feeling and experience of battle, allowing her to improve after each run. This is why Lucy in the past is a normal child, and the Lucy you play now is desensitized to blood, violence, and death. With the loop restarting after each run, his video game world will last forever. This twist recontextualizes what you have experienced and the concept of the ever-looping roguelite world. The cliches Chrono Ark leans on make sense when presented as a generic video game plot. A chosen girl of prophecy, special time MacGuffins, a deus ex machina. It's the creator nodding along and saying, yeah, why would some characters use magic and guns, and others swords and bows? Why does the world restart whether you win or lose? Why are the women's costumes egregious while the men's costumes aren't? I think for that one you could argue that it's the artist having their cake and eating it too, but the past data files show these characters dressed normally, nothing sexy, maybe a shoulder showing. This is a video game world made by Azar, and as we will see, Azar is a terrible person. I wouldn't put it past him to make that decision. While I wouldn't put Chrono Ark next to any literary works, I appreciate how it comments on the genre. One of the curses of the roguelite genre is their story. Why do you keep starting over and over and over again, even if you are truly victorious or defeated? For old arcade games, this wasn't an issue. No one questioned Pac-Man and his eternal Sisyphean existence of eating dots. It was just a game. If the game is trying to have a narrative, however, then you need some explanation. Most roguelites I've come across have each run is a different multiverse, or it's all timey-wimey answers. I have nothing against it, but that's where their story ultimately ends. The story cannot be more than that if the players always have the ability to loop, removing any narrative progression made. The story is always the past and the present, but cannot be the future. I think it would be kind of neat, but unsatisfying if Chrono Ark's story ended here. A lot of media would pull the "it's actually a simulation" twist at the end and call it good. Not Chrono Ark. This twist is just the end of the first act of the story. Chrono Ark's story asks, what are the implications of an eternally looping video game world? What are the implications of people knowing that they are in an eternally looping world? What are the implications of a virtual existence? A new area is unlocked after Whitegrave, the Sanctuary. It has some tough enemies, but great loot. You're going to need this to face the real final boss of the game, the Forgotten King. Everything leading up to the Forgotten King is epic. All of your party members remark at his power. The music ramps up to 11. You know it's the final fight. The Forgotten King is a bastard. Not unfair or an imbalance, but he will wreck you. He has high damage and will destroy life bars. While that's expected, he will hit you in multiple other ways as well. For starters, he puts a cycling debuff on your cards. If you play a card with the debuff, he gains 10% more damage for the rest of the fight, and that card you played is permanently removed from your deck. He also summons an enemy that stuns a character for multiple turns. If you don't kill this shackling chain enemy, or go to the next phase in time, the stun character is killed. Oof. All of this while he is relentlessly pummeling you. Speaking of phases, he has multiple phases, each one equally as mean. After taking a certain amount of damage, the Forgotten King becomes invulnerable. During this time, he summons multiple monoliths. You need to kill these enemies as fast as possible. They don't directly attack you, but every turn they add lightning bolt cards to your hand. You will need to choose which of your party members will get hit by this lightning bolt card. Oof, ow. Kill these monoliths and you're into his final phase. It becomes a race as the Forgotten King removes 2 cards from your deck every turn. You get some say in which cards are removed from your deck, but mostly just fuck you. You need to kill him before he removes all of your cards in your deck. All of this deck pressure while he is dealing massive damage and dishing out pain and weakness debuffs. Oof, ow, owie my bones. It sounds like a lot to manage, and it is. The Forgotten King is the final boss. He holds the final Time Shard. He is the ultimate enemy. the final test of your deck building and mechanical expertise of Chrono Ark. How good are you at the video game? How strong is Lucy as the commander of the investigators? Finally, after getting through that gauntlet of a battle, Lucy picks up his greatsword and delivers the final blow, impaling the Forgotten King. Victory at last. Lucy and her party get the last Time Shard, their moment of triumph. Azar stays behind for a moment as the rest of the party leaves. The Forgotten King, Klein, talks with Azar. See, I wasn't lying when I said Azar was a terrible person. Azar could have just left Klein to be another townsfolk in the Ark. He could have just let Klein stay asleep. But no, Azar hates Klein. Azar wants to punish Klein for everything he has done. This virtual video game world needed a final boss, and what's a better fate for the man he hates? Only after being impaled can Klein have free will. And because Azar hates that Klein was an exception to the looping protocol, Azar kept him like that. Klein's memories are not reset after each loop. He will sit alone in his destroyed throne room, waiting to be killed or kill his daughter Lucy again and again and again. Forever. That's not just getting revenge. That's a fate worse than death. A true Prometheus crows picking at your liver for eternity style of punishment. It is both cruel to Klein and Lucy. However, Klein shrugs it off, knowing Azar made one fatal mistake. Azar is also exempt from the memory reset. A victim of his own revenge, damned to the same fate as Klein. That fact gets under Azar's skin, and Azar brutally destroys Klein, leaving to go join the rest to activate the clock tower. So what happens next? About 3,000 runs, or about 50 years. After a successful run, Lucy, Azar, and the rest of the investigators return to the Ark victorious, ready to activate the clock tower. Azar has bonded with the investigation team as brothers and sisters in arms. Lucy thanks Azar for always being there for her. Azar the hero. Azar the gem of the investigators. After that, it fades to Azar getting absolutely hammered at the bar. He has been skipping his job duties, as Lucy did not pick him to go on her quest this loop, the world loop, so his quote-unquote comrades in arms from before just think of him as a drunk fuck-up. After causing a commotion, Leanne goes as far as to arrest Azar. Azar manages to escape. Azar realizes that while his skill as a warrior has improved after so many loops, his choices and connections he makes are always washed away every time. Azar is starting to realize what Klein meant by his fatal mistake. He realizes that nothing he does matters. After 50 years of going on the same quest and having the same conversations with the same people, Azar wants change. He's done with the world looping. Azar does not want to leave the virtual world, but he wants something new. He wants his great deeds and relations he forms to matter. He wants meaning in his life. He wants more than Chrono Ark. While Lucy has grown to not need him, Azar starts to teach Lucy how to fight. With Lucy subconsciously keeping some of her training, this is the closest Azar can think of keeping something permanent in between loops. Actual change. Afterwards, Azar tries to convince Phoenix to help end the loop, but Phoenix, infinitely enamored with their immortality, says no. With that, Azar seeks help elsewhere. After the Forgotten King's most recent impalement, Azar waits behind as the rest of the investigation team leaves to activate the clock tower. He asks Klein if he knows a way to stop the loop. Klein, being oddly generous, tells Azar if he can awaken the Program Master from his sleep and kill him, he will become the new Program Master. Once he's the Program Master, then he can do whatever he wants with this virtual world. Unfortunately, with the virtual world changed, Klein no longer knows how to awaken the Program Master. He does know the information would be in the archive. The archive contains every single detail of the Ark project. It's the same database Lucy accesses when she sleeps. It's off the beaten path in the Crimson Wilderness, a sealed-off place in the Twisted Land. As Azar heads off to the archive alone, Lucy decides to tag along as well, picking up a sword. Through countless battles and with training from Azar, Lucy is now able to fight. Let's take a break from the plot for a moment and talk about Lucy as a combat character and some side content as well. After going through hundreds of runs, Lucy finally decides to pick up a sword and fight. So Lucy is interesting as you can only play her during a challenge, but since this is a character breakdown, and she is a character, I'll do a breakdown. Lucy is an offense character focused on standby. I've been calling it the Little Hourglass, but officially it's called standby. Lucy's passive is whenever you activate standby, you remove overload from all characters. That's a big deal. That's incredibly powerful, as most of the time you are unable to play cards due to overload costs. Being able to remove overload is the same as having about 1 to 3 extra mana on a turn. You can spend this mana on additional cards or fixed abilities, making each turn have more punch to them. Unfortunately, it's not all gravy. Because Lucy is fighting on the field and providing her standard draw cards, you double dip with overload for her. All of her attacks overload her draw cards, and vice versa. You can remove overload with standby, but then you have the issue of the more you stand by, the faster the enemies will attack you. There was already the dilemma of taking actions before the enemy and efficiently timing your actions, but now there's even more pressure on what cards you can play before the enemy attacks. This juggling act between Lucy's attacks, Lucy's draw cards, and choosing when to stand by for mana is a great deck building and moment-to-moment combat dilemma. This part of her design I love. Her other mechanic is called Step. The most recent drawn non-Lucy card gains a Step buff. Play that card and you get an extra standby to work with. More standby to remove overload and to combo with her other cards. Step is not a once-a-turn thing, you can get more of it by drawing more cards, which aligns with Lucy's draw cards. While her standby mechanic is deep and interesting, Lucy's cards themselves leave a lot to be desired. They seem kind of bland. They seem to lack the design that makes Chrono Ark cards just pop. Lucy's cards scale with gaining and using standby, or generating and playing cards with Step. Her cards reward what you're already doing on your standard Chrono Ark turn, drawing cards and playing cards. The issue with this kind of design is you want to play cards with Step because they're cards you put in your deck. You're already incentivized to play them as you put them in your deck for a reason. A couple of her cards feel like they're just copies of each other, or different forms of play a card to deal damage. While you can say characters like Azar are similar, there's more iteration on their design, so their different cards scale and affect their synergies in different ways. To highlight this, let's compare two of Lucy's cards, Timed Attack and Blitz Step. Timed attack deals solid damage, but will automatically crit if your last action was to stand by. I like timed attack as it's a micro dilemma. Can you, at this point in combat, afford to stand by? Sometimes it's an easy yes. You have 2 standby and 5 actions before the enemy attacks. But sometimes you need to save your standby for removing overload, or you need to play a different card to have the enemy attack first. It might be correct to play timed attack without using standby, or waiting until the next turn when you can play it with standby. Contrast this to Blitz Step. You play Blitz Step anytime during the turn, and at the end of the turn, Blitz Step hits and then deals bonus damage per standby gained this turn. It doesn't need to be managed. You just set it and forget it. You're already trying to get as much standby as possible, so it's a self-fulfilling card. There are no consequences for using excess standby, so if you have extra standby left over, you can just click that hourglass a bunch at the end of the turn. Blitz Step lacks the tension and micro dilemma of timed attack. Without this friction, it's still powerful, more powerful than timed attack even, but less interesting. Overall, I think her cards are just kind of undercooked. It's fine if they want to leave her as is, but I think Lucy as a combat character could be one of my favorite characters with some TLC. The ideas behind her mechanics are fascinating, and there's interesting design space here. Unfortunately, most of her cards are less interesting than what they could be. She's also lacking in rare cards, which I feel are important to characters as they stand out as the real build-around cards, or truly unique effects that only one character can bring to the party. I feel like Reprise should be a rare card, or at least have like a max of 3 on it, but some cornerstone cards would really tie her mechanics together, and exploring the design space around standby and step could really make her kit shine. She is still worth a try, and because it's an optional challenge, you get free credits and a new Lucy rare card to play around with once you complete a full run with her. I don't want to spend too much time on side content, but here's a couple of things to mix up your runs. Expert mode adds new mechanics and increased difficulty. Unlike the standard roguelite beat the game and then beat the game with a slightly harder mode, it's instead binary, normal or expert. Expert mode is harder, so I wouldn't recommend it initially, but it also has a bunch of mechanical changes that makes Chrono Ark more interesting. For example, if you miss in expert mode, you deal 0 damage instead of half damage. Oof. To compensate, some cards gain the tracking attribute, which makes them deal half damage instead if you miss. Suddenly, you have more reasons to consider these cards over others. There are certain events that can only be found in expert mode. There's an entirely new mechanic with cursed enemies, which ups the intensity of normal encounters. Boss fights are more difficult, but also have new mechanics adding additional wrinkles to their fight. My favorite change is instead of starting out with a predetermined skill, you instead gain 2 skills when your character first levels up. It gives you more freedom in how you want to build your deck, and makes playing new runs more interesting and varied. It's odd how the mechanical interests of expert mode are paired with the difficulty increase. I wish they were uncoupled, as the mechanical parts are worth giving to new players who are not ready for the increased difficulty. Plus, because it's binary, normal, or expert, there's no room for those who have beaten expert and want a harder challenge. There is the blood mist system for those wanting a harder challenge, but that's also kind of weird. I'm not really a fan of it. It adds too much randomness to your draws, and it doesn't really fill the niche of ascension levels in games like Slay the Spire or Monster Train. Alright, I need to talk about Sir Dorichi. After completing the Hedgehog questline, you can take the Sword of the Forest and challenge a new boss at the end of the second zone. Just look at him! Oh, this is peak enemy design. He has great music, interesting mechanic, and 2 phases. Oh, I love him. If you win, you get an upgraded Sword of the Forest, letting you avoid death and deal massive damage once per stage. If I had any modding skills, I would make Sir Dorichi a playable character in a heartbeat. A+, good stuff. After learning about the archive, you can find a secret way to the Crimson Wilderness. Aesthetically, I really like this place. It's Western inspired, but with that same melancholy tone that the rest of the game has. There's one large tree in the center, which the falling leaves paint the area red. The music is great as well. I like the enemy designs, especially the boss Gunslinger Godo. His design stands out enough that he could have been a character in your party. Mechanically, it's harder and more complex than most areas. Yes, people can clear it no problem, but compared to the normal Bloody Park 2, you can see the difference. In this area, there are no events, no treasure chests, no exploring the map. Just you, a reusable campfire, and 3 fights to get through. I recommend bringing bread. All of the enemies in the Crimson Wilderness are unique to this area, and all of them are there to kick your ass. While the boss Gunslinger Godo is a lower power level than the Forgotten King, he is just as mechanically complex. By beating this area, you're rewarded with powerful one-of-a-kind loot. Consumable items like smokescreen grenades let you automatically dodge one attack. Feasts overheal your entire party out of combat for 60%, and blacksmith hammers give you free rerolls on equipment and relics. Once you beat the boss, the ending area contains unique equipment, relics, and your choice between another relic slot or 6 extra uses of the campfire blacksmith. It's absolutely worth the pain if your deck can take the difficulty, as succeeding here will give you a power boost against the harder enemies ahead. While I don't always go to the Crimson Wilderness, these kinds of side areas help keep the game fresh. If you go into the enemy encyclopedia, you can find out why this place is sealed off. A mysterious figure muses on the people of the Crimson Wilderness. In the process of figuring out how to get a virtual world set up, they created these replicas. The inhabitants of the Crimson Wilderness are copies from the people of the Ark project, but they're still unique individuals. Their memories were altered and experimented on. Basically, test dummies for the real people of the Ark project. Because they're replicas, their data is outside of the looping protocol. They keep their memories. After researching what they needed, the people experimenting on these replicas left them here to fight and kill each other. Born to a world of violence and bloodshed, always repeating their life and death. Nothing else exists for them. That has to be unethical. Back to the plot. Azar and Lucy finally reach the archive within the large tree in the Crimson Wilderness. Azar ditches Lucy to find the information he needs. After looking through the data files, Azar realizes the archive has too much information in it. Azar also notices that a time period in the archive has been erased. Azar suddenly remembers that he erased something, but he can't remember what he erased. Azar just realizes he can't find the answers he's looking for, but he knows Klein can find them. Azar acquires a way to remotely access the archive and takes off to the Forgotten King alone. Azar knows how to disable Klein's imprisonment without impalement, and gives Klein the remote access needed. After looking through the archive, Klein determines that the only way to stop the loop was deleted from the archive by Azar. That is what Azar deleted. Azar realizes that he has been done in by his own hubris. He has become the equivalent of Pac-Man and his eternal Sisyphean existence of eating Dot. Azar does not take this well. Klein knew during the development of the Ark project that long-term exposure to life in a virtual world would mentally break people. Their bodies stay the same, but the participants will be mentally hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Most people are not ready for that. This isn't the first piece of media to ponder the question of immortal people going insane. So knowing this, Klein implemented the loop, deleting their memories to save those people from this hell. Klein and Phoenix are willing to martyr themselves for the cause and oversee the Ark project. It wasn't power Klein wanted. Instead, he was sacrificing himself to save those people who put their trust in him. For Klein, the Ark project is humanity's best shot, and he's willing to suffer no matter what, even with Azar fucking around and finding out. Klein is an extreme utilitarian. He believes that he is always working for the greater good of humanity and will further his goals no matter the cost. A few people might have to be thrown around like regs, but in the end, it is for the greater good. Of course, Klein knows how to awaken the Master Program, and Klein knows that killing the Program Master does not make you the new Program Master. A person can only gain Master permissions if there's a democratic majority vote. Killing the Program Master to take their power would just devolve the virtual world into chaos and bloodshed. Logic that would make sense in an anime or video game, but not real life. If lying to Azar's face is what is needed to save humanity, then Klein will do that. After all, Azar helped put him in his current situation. With remote access, Klein can now monitor the outside world, knowing when to stop the Ark project. Azar played right into Klein's hands. Klein realizes the best estimate for when the Ice Age will end is 421 years. So all that means to Klein is he has to wait 421 years. After Azar leaves the archive, Phoenix, who had been tracking him, stumbles upon Lucy. She read everything. Everything in the archive. Lucy has found out the awful truths of this virtual world. Her life, emotions, experiences, reality itself is a lie. She is being manipulated and misled by both Azar and Phoenix. And it all ends in a brutal confrontation with her father, and she is powerless to change this. After this loop, she's going to just forget everything, going back to the cruel lie she lives. The serious, cold, emotionless Lucy breaks down crying, showing that there is still the same scared child in there. A child who loves her father, who doesn't want to be a prisoner to her fate. Chio joined the Ark project because her real body is failing. She had an incurable genetic disorder, and every day was pain. She was simply waiting for her death. Klein recruited her to help run the Ark project and gave her a new virtual life. But that virtual life would eventually end. The Ark project's goal is to return to the real world, and once that happens, she does not know how much time she has left. Maybe a couple of months, maybe a couple of weeks. After talking with the betrayer, she freaked out about the virtual world ending, and betrayed Klein. I understand how she was able to rationalize her decision. She had eternal life. It was to escape from the cold, harsh truth that she is destined to unfairly die. She was just able to accept the abstract suffering of Klein and Lucy for her never-ending life. Seeing the brutality of the consequences to her actions up close and personal made Phoenix realize that she can't live like this. Her perfect life is not worth the suffering of a child and the man she looked up to. She, for once, truly feels guilty for her actions. Wanting to absolve her guilt, she goes to talk to the recently impaled Klein. He suggests reverse engineering the betrayer's potion to remove Lucy from the loop and give her her memories back. This potion was made from some of the abstract data in the MMO, which made people be able to keep their memories between loops. This potion will give Lucy agency to not kill her father, even if it means she is a prisoner in this game as well. With that, Phoenix sets off to work to reverse engineer the betrayer's potion. As the second act ends, we're heading truly into the super spoiler section. If you have any interest in playing Chrono Ark, I recommend ending the video now, going and buying the game, and seeing how this plot unfolds on your own. Of course, I'm the kind of person who watches these videos all the way through, so stick around if you still want to find out how this ends. After these plot events, we jump ahead by 25,000 runs. That is an undefinable amount of time for our human minds. The average human tops out around 100 years of life. Maybe in the future we will get someone to 150 years old. 25,000 runs translates to over 500 years. The entire time Azar, Klein, and Phoenix have been aware, awake, and for the most part suffering. During this time, Phoenix has been working with Laren, the head researcher at the Ark, to find the correct combination of items to recreate the quote-unquote betrayer's potion. Eventually, after thousands upon thousands of loops, they're able to find the correct combination. After drinking the potion, Laren now has her memories from every single loop, and she joins the investigation team to help Lucy out. Let's break down her character. Laren is a support character who specializes in healing barriers and drawing cards. Both things I like. Starting with her passive, she has the ability to craft items at the campfire. While it's not directly related to her card mechanics, it's still one of my favorite passives. Because Laren keeps her memories between loops, she is able to transform equipment and relics into equipment and relics you gained on your last run. Have too many swords? Turn one into a shield. You had a cool relic that you couldn't build around last time? Add Laren into your party and build around it this time. It's a nice bonus and a flavor slam dunk. A+, good stuff, that's what I'm here for. Laren is primarily a healer, but the way she goes about it is a bit weird. Laren operates with healing barriers. They act like individual barriers, but at the end of the turn, any leftover barriers are turned into healing. What you get from this mechanic is better overall mitigation than normal healing. As discussed earlier, barriers are a stronger form of mitigation as it's preemptive. You are able to go above the character's max HP and protect the character's healing gauge. With healing barriers, any leftover barriers is turned into healing, making them not go to waste. The trade-off, however, is that you're giving up speed and agency. If an investigator is at death's door, you have to wait until the end of the turn before the healing actually takes effect. It's much scarier to wait and hope that the healing barrier holds than just playing a direct healing card. Even if the dying character lives that turn, any damage the barrier takes reduces how much healing the character will receive. You could have a character protected by a healing barrier and still be at death's door at the start of their next turn. Laren has one card, Regeneration Line, that directly heals instead of providing a healing barrier at death's door, but that's her only real direct healing. With any other Laren card, you just have to hope that the healing barrier lasts until the end of the turn, or get another party member with faster healing. The other half of her toolkit deals with drawing cards. Drawing cards in a deck builder is always good, so these cards are powerful, but with limitations. Infinity Spiral allows you to draw cards when attacking the cursed enemy. Octagon Spiral makes the enemy take damage every time you draw a card. Both of these effects stop if you have 5 or more cards in hand, meaning you have to find a way to play those cards or strip them from your hand to continue to use these combo cards. A great way of doing that is with Dragon Curve, allowing you to discard cards in your hand for massive damage. Ilya approves. I like that these cards are powerful, but highly conditional, as card draw in deck builders is a delicate balance. Not enough card draw, and the luck of the draw becomes too important. It's too swingy. With too much card draw, you can easily go infinite playing your entire deck. While satisfying, it kind of becomes the optimal way to play as there's no luck of the draw. It's too consistent. I'm not smart enough to work out an infinite combo in Chrono Ark, and mechanics like Overload help to stop those from popping up. But if there is one in this game, I'm sure Mobius Strip would be a part of it. Once played, for the rest of the turn, if you have less than 5 cards in hand, straight up just draw back up to 5. Yeah, that's the kind of busted shit I'm talking about. Overall, Laren is one of my favorite supports and another great addition to the cast. Now that I've covered all of the support characters, I want to go back to a point I made earlier in this video. The designers have managed to make multiple ways of healing and support unique and interesting. Each support focuses on a unique aspect. Prezel's direct healing, Joey's healing over time, Siz's positioning of Eve, Huzz's kind of weird healing wounds, Selena's deck manipulation, and Laren's healing barriers. This variety and unique ways of healing make each support feel different. In my experience, designers always have a million ways to make attacking and dealing damage interesting in games, but healing and support generally gets left behind, defaulting to HP number goes up. I really applaud Al Fine's efforts with Chrono Ark. Back to the story. Lucy goes about her normal run impaling the Forgotten King, but this time it's different. Klein, having enough willpower to stay alive, reaches out to Lucy and hugs her. He knows it's time for the Ark project to conclude. It's time to stop the simulation. He laments that it had to come to this. This wasn't how things should have gone. He promises her that after they are out of this virtual reality, he'll get her a cake for her birthday and have a nice picnic in the warm sun. He gives her the key to awaken the master program, to stop this loop, to get back to real life. He tells her, most importantly, do not trust Azar. Do not give him this key. Unfortunately, Azar is also there, overhearing the conversation. Azar also wants to stop the loop, but never go back to the real world. Chrono Ark is his real world. His life outside Chrono Ark is but a far-off dream at this point. Listening to Klein, and upset that Azar had been lying to Lucy this whole time, she refuses to give Azar the key. With no other choice, Azar attacks. After a brutally one-sided fight, Lucy still refuses to give the key to Azar. Azar takes it by force. The loop restarts. Unlike before, Phoenix is there to greet Lucy when she first wakes. Phoenix gives her the Betrayer's Potion, and Lucy regains her memories. With her memories, she gathers the investigation team and goes off to confront Azar. The final run. At the end of your run, instead of going to the sanctuary, you activate a glyph using Lucy's necklace, causing you to slip between the virtual fantasy world. It is here, at the end of the virtual world, that you will face Azar once and for all. This, people, is how you do a final boss. It has so much going for it. Let's start with the plot. This fight is personal to the characters in the story. So many RPGs have this eldritch being or greater god at the end of the game. But it's not personal. I understand fighting a god is dramatic, trust me, I played enough Shin Megami Tensei. But do the characters have a complicated past or history with this eldritch being? Do they know this eldritch god personally? Were they betrayed by God? This personal connection cements not just who you are fighting, but why you are fighting. Lucy knows Azar. She knows his motivations. She knows what he did to her and her father. This fight is also personal to the players. You've used Azar in your party. He started out as the good anime sword boy. Personally, I cut my teeth on how to play this game with Azar. You know what his attacks are, you know his mechanics, his deck. So the designers take all of that and throw it right in your face. It's beautiful. Coupled with the presentation, this fight is epic. I hate using the word epic, as I feel that it's been applied to so many mundane things, it loses its meaning. But this fight is in every sense of the word epic. We are at the edge of the virtual world, the black hole where the simulation ends. This is the endgame. There's no turning back. The future of humanity lies on your shoulder. The stakes cannot be higher. The music is dramatic, but still keeps the melancholy tone that the rest of the game has. The artist went above and beyond for this fight. There are actual fight animations and cutscenes in between phases. Look at this! Holy shit, it looks so cool! All of that, and the mechanics are a slam dunk. Azar is absolutely going to kick your teeth in, especially on expert mode. There is no mercy here. Azar's main mechanic is creating illusion swords. These swords are weak enemies that target one of your allies, but he gets a lot of them. A lot of them. He gets these from his attacks or from the illusion sword debuff. If you play, exchange, or discard a card with this debuff, he gets an illusion sword. He's always guaranteed at least one illusion sword debuff each turn from Azar's passive. His abilities are the cards you are familiar with. Shining Aura adds a bleed debuff on the illusion swords. Ascending Strike attacks a character with all of the illusion swords on the field. And Blade Starfall, oh god, we'll get into that. Azar the boss is completely in sync with Azar the party member. The mechanics are deeply familiar to you, yet at the same time are twists on what you know. Managing illusion swords is key as you need to kill Azar, but with too many swords on the field, you'll straight up die. Luckily, Lucy is here to help. Every turn she has a card in your hand which lets you destroy all illusion swords for free. With this, you don't have to use your attack cards on the illusion swords and you can focus on Azar. But you only get to use this Lucy card 4 times the entire fight. And with Azar's passive, you're going to be summoning illusion swords all fight long. This creates friction where you want to play a card but can't. Unlike the Forgotten King fight, these illusion sword debuffs don't rotate, they just stay on your cards. Azar has attacks to discard your cards with the illusion sword debuffs, so never playing them is not an option. You have to decide when it's important to have Lucy kill the illusion swords. Once you lower Azar's health pool, you move on to phase 2, because of course, it can't be that easy. Azar will literally destroy your entire hand of cards at the end of the turn, dealing damage per card destroyed. Fuck you. Lucy can block this attack, but it requires getting her deflect card from the bottom of your hand to the top as Azar cuts downwards. The more mana you spend above the deflect card, the higher the position deflect goes. But if you spend mana on cards below deflect, it then goes down in your hand. So you have to hand manage this deflect card while also dealing with everything from the first phase. As you beat him down, Azar moves into his final phase. It's Blade Starfall, Azar's ultimate attack card, and it's against you. Such a goddamn power pose. This is it. All you have to do is just defeat the 2 veiled illusion swords guarding Azar to find— oh god! Azar rains down swords every time you play a card, pelting your entire party for damage, and debuffs, and damage over time. Jeez. Luckily, it's only the first 3 cards you play, and he doesn't target the character who has the top card in your hand. Yay. He has no other attacks, thankfully, and fixed abilities do not trigger Blade Starfall. You want to play the top card of your hand to move around who's safe from Blade Starfall, but he still gives you Illusion Sword debuffs, summoning Illusion Swords if you play the top card. Is this phase a DPS race? Yes, Azar is trying to kill you. You can't just sit there tanking the Blade Starfalls for 10 turns. I don't think you could have that much defense or healing, and every turn his Veiled Sword Protectors get another terrible effect, such as removing the top card of your hand, stunning a character at the start of the turn until they're healed, dealing 15 damage to the person who defeated the Veiled Sword, etc. These Veiled Swords respawn at half health after playing 5 cards when they're defeated, so you have to kill them around the same time. You can't only play attack cards as you will die. I've tried. I died. So you have to ride this thin line between taking the time to protect your party and also dealing enough damage to end the fight. It's so good. Finally, after you defeat this, it's over. You've won. You watch the final attack from Lucy. What an amazing boss fight. As the fight concludes, the Program Master awakens. Azar, being ahead of you, rushes over to him to make his dreams become reality, and realizes a horrible truth. Past memories flood into his mind. The reason that he deleted his memories from the archive is that he knows the Program Master is Azar. The real Azar. This Azar, the one who has been looping for hundreds of years, is a replica, the same kind that were thrown into the Crimson Wilderness. Program Master Azar needed someone to take his place of Azar in this new world, so he created a clone. The replica Azar absolutely loses it and tries to kill the real Azar, still believing the false narrative of whoever kills the Program Master inherits his power. A false narrative that Klein put forward that an Azar born in a video game world would understand. With a simple wave of his hand, the Program Master eradicates the replica Azar, deleting him from the virtual world. Lucy goes over to the dying replica Azar. As he lies there, he laments on the pointlessness of his life. He needed to become the Program Master because returning to the real world is not possible for him. If the virtual world was to end, that would also be the end of his existence. While he was set up by Klein to try to fight the god of this virtual world, he was doomed from the start. He tells Lucy to finish his task. He wants something in his life to have meaning. If Lucy defeats the Program Master through the years of combat training the replica Azar gave her, some part of him will exist past his miserable virtual life. He doesn't care what she chooses afterwards, just that she defeats the Program Master. After that, Azar fades away, permanently deleted. Lucy and Phoenix talk to the Program Master, to the real Azar. Life is meaningless to Azar, and his only recourse is to destroy this virtual world. Azar laments that the world he created was not ideal. It wasn't eternal happiness. It was hell. He realizes that he is no better than Klein, pushing his ideals onto those participating in the Ark project unwillingly. Lucy, not wanting to be destroyed, decides to fight Azar. While the fight gets style points for the presentation, mechanically it's less of an interesting boss fight compared to fighting the clone Azar. It's more blunt, more brutal, but less nuanced. Just hit the enemy really hard, do as much damage as you can, and you'll probably be okay. I'm not really going into more detail into that, sorry. Once defeated, Lucy does the unthinkable and cuts the Program Master Azar in two. With a dramatic "Ah!", Azar disappears, defeated. Lucy suddenly feels a new power wash over her. It looks like she becomes the Program Master after killing Azar. Maybe I was wrong. Killing the Program Master seems to make you the Program Master. Victory at last. Phoenix cheers, and Lucy, with her newfound powers, creates a way to finally return to the real world. Lucy and Phoenix walk into the door made of light. A computer pops up to let us know that Lucy and Chio's memories have been uploaded, causing them to awaken. The hero's journey ends with the return with an elixir. Success at last. A happy ending. Yet, Lucy and Phoenix are still here in the virtual world. Something has to be wrong. Lucy begs Phoenix to tell her what happened. Phoenix nonchalantly tells Lucy that both of their memories have been uploaded to the real Lucy and Chio, who believe that they just escaped the virtual world. They will awaken everyone else and go on to rebuild humanity. The Ark project is complete, and the jobs of the virtual replicas are over. And so Phoenix disappears, leaving the replica Lucy alone, afraid, abandoned. Lucy is presented a past log of Klein with Stella, one of the researchers testing out the Ark transferring system. Stella goes into the virtual world, memorizes a code, and wakes up keeping her memories. It looks like importing and exporting memories is a success. Klein lets Stella know that that's it for today, and she leaves. The monitor comes back on. The virtual Stella is still there. Klein was not just a project head of the Ark project. He was one of the main researchers in the memory storage technology for the Ark project. He knew that having people go into a deep sleep and connecting to a virtual world at the same time would be dangerous, so he thought of a workaround. He would make a virtual replica of everyone participating in the Ark project. He would copy their memories, make sure they think of themselves as 100% a real person, and once the Ice Age has passed, the replica's memories would be transferred to their human counterparts when they wake up. For the humans, it was as seamless as possible. Unfortunately for Klein, it seems like the virtual copy of the persons being uploaded stayed around after uploading. They had to be deleted manually. The virtual Stella begs and pleads with Klein not to delete her, not to kill her. Klein assures her sacrifice won't be in vain, as this is for the sake of humanity. Some people might have to be thrown around like rags, but it's for the greater good. Right? This, right here, is the final matryoshka of suffering. While Klein's plan already had to have some ethical issues about it, this absolutely crosses a line. Those participating in the Ark project are unknowingly killing a sentient copy of themselves. Learning about this really puts Klein's character into perspective. I've been coy about Klein's beliefs, as only now we know the full extent of how far he will go. Klein is able to justify his goals by whatever means necessary. He hired mercenary guards to prevent civilians from getting into the Ark project. He lied about the true extent of the project even to his trusted associates. And he could have stopped the continued suffering of the virtual world by ending the simulation at any time. A generous reading is that he's an extreme utilitarian, doing what is best for humanity no matter the cost. A less generous reading is that he's an egomaniacal tech bro who is so obsessed with his vision that an unlimited amount of human suffering can be justified for his actions. I think the part where he creates beings with sentience and then willingly kills them for the Ark project crossed the line for me. Looking back, however, is the Ark project, Klein's all-consuming vision, the best hope for humanity? This project might have been great for the 600 people or so involved with it, but there were billions of people who were left behind on the frozen Earth. A large number of people cryogenically froze themselves, but if Klein's plan is to awaken them after 500 years, that's relying on a lot of factors going right. I think a more likely scenario is Klein is wanting to start humanity fresh with these 600 people. Even then, it does not look like these were the best people to choose from. You have people like Silverstein, who's a mob enforcer, and Joey, who's a spoiled rich brat. Sure, there was a plan to teach them survival skills, but why not choose a more reasonable candidates like survivalists or farmers? This virtual survival training all went to hell anyway when the betrayer learned the fate of the virtual replicas. They told everyone, and mass chaos and rioting ensued. Klein is so obsessed with his vision that he's missing the forest from the trees. The Ark project is just a top 1% solution to the climate apocalypse. Klein is sure that this is the only pathway for humanity to succeed, but that isn't the best for the humans who are left to freeze to death. There are old message forums in which people are getting the word out to move to the subway systems to try to survive. All of the time, energy, and money spent on the Ark project could have been spent on something else like an underground bunker. This takes place in the future with controllable robots, advanced genetics, and whatever the hell technology the Ark project actually is. I'm not going to point out plot holes here, but it's more so saying with this level of technology and money involved, there has to be a better solution that helps humanity more than just, we're going to commit ethic violations and go to sleep, see ya in 500 years. Klein thinks it's for the greater good. But really, is it not just to serve his self-centered savior complex? My own biased reading of this is that the Ark project is the same callous solution of the current modern-day top 1% building bunkers or super yachts for the coming climate change. Their plan is to continue living their extravagant lives while the rest of humanity suffers. Once climate change starts to affect them, they will retreat to their bunkers and super yachts. This same callousness extends throughout the game. It's the same as Phoenix accepting Klein and, more importantly, Lucy's brutal cycle of killing. It's the same callousness for those replicas in the Crimson Wilderness who know nothing but an eternal cycle of death. It's the same callousness to delete sentient clones of your coworkers as they're begging you not to kill them. This isn't to say that Clone Azar's plan was correct either, as this virtual world of Chrono Ark is one of suffering. Sure, people can have a good time, alcohol exists, but this world is post-apocalyptic. The Black Fog has destroyed the rest of civilization, and while fantasy magic and sword fighting is cool, it's a world of constant strife and violence. It's not a world to live in. It's not a world to raise a family in. It's not a world to build a society in. I don't blame Clone Azar, as it's the only world he's known. If your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So where does that leave us? As Lucy finishes watching the virtual Stella be deleted by Klein, Azar appears. Azar is the god of this virtual world. He deleted his clone in one strike. There's no way Lucy and some ragtag band of investigators could actually defeat him. If he wanted to, Azar could delete all of them with just the wave of his hand. No, Azar wanted to show Lucy the truth. He needed to show her the consequences of fulfilling Klein's goal. The true fate of all of the virtual replicas in this world. Even as the program master, Azar is no different than everyone else doomed in this virtual world. He laments that he also wanted a normal life. He wanted to settle down, have some kids, and pass away at an old age. Once he learned that he was created simply to be a sacrifice for his human counterpart, he fell into despair. He thought the looping world would cause endless joy by having everyone band together for a common goal. But all it did was cause suffering. All of this virtual life is suffering. Azar wants to end it all, destroying the simulation. If they return to reality, they will be disposed of. And this video essay has really gone over how awful the looping world was. Lucy agrees. She's had enough. Everything is meaningless. The only way to show resistance to their fate, the only way to cry into the night, is to destroy the simulation. Their memories won't be uploaded to their human counterparts, and so they won't awaken. They will take those who damn them down with them. It's a fleeting victory, but a victory nonetheless. As Azar goes to delete Lucy, Phoenix jumps into the way, taking the blow instead. Alright, we need to talk about the bird in the room. Much like Klein, only after this moment did I want to talk about Phoenix's character. We've gone over Chio, but we need to cover Phoenix as an individual person, an individual replica. Phoenix knew this whole time that they were a replica, as Chio was the only other person privy to Klein's plan. Chio, knowing that she was going to die soon after the Ark project was completed, said hell with it and made their virtual replica of Phoenix. Might as well create a fantastical creature in this virtual world, right? She always had an affinity for the mythical creature. Her hacker call sign was Phoenix, after all. More symbolically, Phoenix is the ideal version of Chio. Chio lost a leg due to unfortunate circumstances, so her avatar can't just walk, they can fly. Phoenix does not feel pain, unlike Chio's existence of constant pain. And lastly, Phoenixes are immortal, the opposite of Chio's terminal diagnosis. Phoenix is everything Chio wanted in life. Throughout the story, I assumed that Phoenix was Chio and vice versa, but because Phoenix is a unique individual, it really recontextualizes previous story beats. While immortal, Phoenix inherited Chio's fear of dying. They are free here in the virtual world, but as soon as the Ark project is over, they're gone, deleted with the rest of the replicas. Even after 150 years of hanging out with the frozen Ark project, the looming dread of being deleted still persists. It's not Chio, but Phoenix who inhabited the robot in the real world. Phoenix impulsively destroyed the sensors and transmitters for the Ark project. Without knowing the state of the human world, those in the Ark project would be unable to leave. Phoenix takes this time to go to Chio, their creator, their other half, the person who needs them to die to live. Yet Chio will also die once the project is completed. While Phoenix is truly the ideal version of Chio, some part of Phoenix is still Chio. To complete their sabotage, Phoenix takes the robot out into the snow. This is their only chance to actually experience the real world. Their only chance to see what Chio experienced. Outside the underground lab, the snow sweeps across the landscape. The chaotic and unending snow is blinding. As the robot loses power, Phoenix only has one singular thought. It's truly beautiful. It must be the equivalent of a two-dimensional person seeing the third dimension. Phoenix's one goal, one motivation, was to live, experience life as much as possible. Yet, through their experiences, throughout the narrative, they realize that their insatiable selfish drive to live is only leading others to suffering, especially Lucy. Throughout the story, Phoenix is able to give up this callousness towards others. At the end, they are willing to give up their life for Lucy. Phoenix does not care what path Lucy chooses, but they just want Lucy to be happy. They give their life so others can live. They accept that they will die, but that does not mean that their life was meaningless. I know Phoenix is an important character in Chrono Ark's plot, but I think Phoenix is actually the protagonist of Chrono Ark. It's a hot take, I know, but Phoenix is the driving force of the plot in Chrono Ark. More than that, Phoenix is the character who actually changes. Phoenix started self-centered and scared at the ever-looming void they faced. They betrayed Klein, and while I don't have a high opinion of Klein, Phoenix still caused this looping world and sat back while others suffered. By being confronted by Lucy in the archives, Phoenix saw that their actions have consequences. They knew these consequences were real, but just chose to ignore them. They worked hard to get the Betrayer potion for Lucy, and at the end, Phoenix sticks around with Lucy the whole way. Now, when it really matters, they sacrifice themselves to save Lucy. Out of all the characters in Chrono Ark, Phoenix has the largest character arc. They drove the plot, and by the end, they were fully transformed. While Lucy is the character at the center of the web of actions, and the character you play as throughout the game, she's not really driving the plot forward. She can't drive the plot as she has no agency, the looping world and all of that. She does not really have a character arc, and mostly just follows the orders from Clone Azar and Klein until the very end of the game. Out of anybody in the game, Phoenix is the one who causes change to happen and actually grows as a person, or bird in this case. I don't know why it took me this long to realize that. The bird based on eating bread is the real protagonist of this game? I think I've truly lost it at this point. While Phoenix lies dying, they talk with Lucy and Azar. Phoenix knows their sacrifice is meaningless if the world will be destroyed, but pleads to Azar that they just want Lucy to be happy. While they are replicas, that does not mean that they are not real. What they experienced is valid. Their thoughts and feelings mattered. They deserve happiness, even if their existence is a cruel joke. This made me look back and realize that this whole time I have been focusing on the quote-unquote real world people, and not the investigators who are also experiencing reality. Yes, they are virtual, and their lives endlessly repeat, but through the master program, Azar made these people be able to be their ideal selves. While some people like Narhan and Miss Chain did not change much, this virtual world let others truly be themselves. Charon is free to be an edgy teenager instead of having the pressure of inheriting a billion-dollar corporation. Hein is bold and cocky instead of being helpless. Joey can be respected for his inventions and generally helpful towards others in society instead of being a useless sack of shit. His words, not mine. Even if this virtual world and their stories were fabricated, does that not mean their stories are less important? Limiting my scope to only the real world made me miss the real stories of these virtual investigators. And that's kind of a shame. As for Lucy, the girl of prophecy, she had been a tool lacking any agency. Azar put her in the center of this virtual world against her will. Clone Azar trained this child in fighting and bloodshed to carry on his legacy. Phoenix knew everything this whole time and lied to her. And Klein, her own father, buttered her up so she would fulfill his goal and then be cast aside, deleted forever. The child deserves to live a normal life, more than just the end of her suffering, but actual happiness. This moves Azar. He still wishes to destroy the world, but acknowledges that his original beliefs were wrong. These replicas deserve to have normal, fulfilling lives. He should not take that away from them. He gives Lucy an alternative to Klein's plan. He will set up the virtual world to be a return to normal, everyday life before the Ice Age, deleting everyone's memory. They will not awaken their human counterparts, and eventually the computer system will perish after everyone involved in the Ark project is long gone. They can get the happy life that Azar dreamed of but could never have. The choice to be made reflects the differences in ideology between Azar and Klein. Do we value the moral of the action or the consequences? Before the Ark project, Azar, Klein, and Stella were attacked by an apocalypse cult. The building catches on fire, and Azar and Klein lose track of Stella. Azar needs to save Stella as she is his friend. He will risk his life for her, as morally that is the right thing to do. Klein cares only that Azar and him leave the burning building alive. The Ark project cannot go on without the two of them, but it can go on without Stella. She is not worth the risk to the Ark project and the fate of humanity. Are the sacrifices of the few worth the lives of the many? It's not a new moral or philosophical debate. Essays and books have been written about this topic for hundreds of years. If anything, Chrono Ark is just dipping its toes into the waters. However, what I like about Chrono Ark is it does not give a clear, correct answer. I've been railing against Klein, but at the end of the day, if he saves more people than Azar, or even saves all of humanity, then it would be worth it, right? How much sacrifice is needed to achieve that goal? How many people need to suffer? Azar's plan is more humane, but also sacrifices the survival of the human species. I personally would lean on Azar's side, but I've never been in a situation that requires that level of decision needing to be made. I've never led troops into battle, ran governments, or tried to save the human race. Some level of utilitarianism is required. There isn't some golden ending here. There can't be. Something has to give. While there are two endings, unfortunately this video essay is released before the second one is out. We will have to go with the ending in which Lucy agrees to Azar's term. I still think it's a strong ending, so I'm running with it. Lucy agrees to erase everyone's memory and the world is reborn. It might be the wrong choice for humanity, but it is the right choice for these virtual people. Once the world has been transformed, you see Lucy leaving off to school, saying bye to her dad who made her a nice lunch. On her way to school, she sees what must be a giant bird. She ruminates on how life is going great for her, and that she can confidently say that she is happy. Roll credits. The other ending, when it's eventually released, might be as heroic or uplifting, but I'm glad we have this ending. Maybe there's a twist on a twist, but what we get from this ending is freedom from suffering, escape from the horror, the infinite looping roguelite story coming to a close. Happiness. Chrono Ark's story is one of disempowerment. Lucy, as the chosen one, is powerless to make a difference, forever looping and forgetting her memories. Clone Azar is set up to be this mentor and betrayer character, but doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of the plot. Klein, who is the foil to the betrayer and the benevolent father figure, is probably the most ruthless and twisted character in the game. And at the end, Azar, the god of this virtual world, is just as trapped and powerless as Lucy, Klein, and everyone else. The final conflict does not end with a dramatic fight, but with the sad realization no one can leave the virtual world. It inverts the tropes established by this genre to tell something new. This feeling of disempowerment works because of the conventions of the roguelite genre. The player, Lucy's subconscious, is empowered throughout the game by unlocking new content and by mastering the system. However, because everything is reset, win or lose, the plot is allowed to remove narrative progression without removing mechanical progression. I always had an issue with Slay the Spire's ending, as you slay the spire, triumphantly completing the character's goal. The game congratulates you, then you do it again, just with a slightly harder spire to slay. Its story is fruitless because there's always another spire to slay. Always another clock tower to activate, right? Narratively, a loop is not always cruel. Darkest Dungeon 2 uses a recurring loop for meditation and reflection. Each cycle brings the protagonist closer to enlightenment. The cruelty of the loop in Chrono Ark is because of the moral cost to sustain it. From the inception, the virtual world was built on cruelty. The looping world was perfect for Phoenix. All things considered, Phoenix had a pretty swell time, learning to paint, picking up an instrument, etc. Infinite time was a luxury. For everyone else, it was at best stagnation, and at worst, a literal hell. The loop needed to end because of the cruelty. Chrono Ark's loop unveils the true central conflict of stories in the roguelite genre. It's all pointless. Nihilism runs deep throughout Chrono Ark because it admits that the concept of a roguelite game in and of itself is fundamentally nihilistic. Win or lose, there's always another boulder to roll up the hill. There is no future. Yet, at the end, Chrono Ark does not fall into the trap of cynicism. It treats its characters and world with respect. It's rooting for them to succeed. It's trying to impart meaning into their struggles. The underlying message I get from Chrono Ark is these games might be pointless in a narrative sense, but the characters, and more importantly, your experience, is not meaningless. Funny enough, in the video game Hades, you can actually talk to Sisyphus. He's surprisingly alright with his quote-unquote eternal punishment. He's come to terms with his existence, and looks forward to rolling up his boulder, Boldy, up a hill every single day. Less of a fan of the lashes from his tormentors. To Sisyphus, he is content with the success he can make and restarting his task every day. The loop humbled him into being a better person. It gives him meaning among his pointless existence. These characters in Chrono Ark also are looking for that meaning, whether it is through obtaining a normal life in the virtual world or sacrificing their virtual selves for their physical selves. Once again, while I don't have both endings available to go off of, I feel like they will both work for this game. It's not the good ending and the bad ending, as in both cases they resolve the narrative conflict. The investigators, Lucy, Klein, Azar, and even Phoenix will have meaning in their lives. And that is more than enough for those in a roguelite deck building loop. So why did I feel that I needed to video essay? Why this game? Why Chrono Ark? I'm an antisocial internet lurker. Why would I put myself out there? I've come to two conclusions. First is that I needed to expunge this demon from my body. All of these opinions, thoughts, and feelings I have for this game needed to be expressed, needed to be said out loud, immortalized, for better or worse. Judging by the runtime of this video essay, it's safe to say that the demon is truly expunged. Second is that I think Chrono Ark is worth talking about. The worst fate for a game, hell, any creative media in this day and age, is to be lost in the endless noise of every other creative project out there. I'm sure this video essay will be swept away under the tides of the internet. I have no delusions of grandeur, but like Don Quixote foolishly charging windmills, I still want to publish this. Chrono Ark deserves that. It doesn't deserve my floundering about, but it's a piece of media worthy of at least one video essay. This game should be a hit, at least in the roguelite deck building genre. It should be in every "You like Slay the Spire? Try X game" list that's online. It seems to have failed to capture people in the West as it captures me. While there are plenty of fans, I think part of the issue is the marketing and localization. While there are very positive Steam reviews, one of my friends said that looking at the Steam page for Chrono Ark, they got the shitty anime spend all of your money gotcha vibes. And I kinda have to agree. I bought this game on a whim with low expectations. I'm the kind of person who can't get enough of deck builders, so I assumed it would at least scratch that itch. It's so much more than that, but you can't see it unless you buy the game and try it. This is wild as the game is still being developed. If the patch I'm on was the state of the game, it would still be worth talking about. But AL Fine are adding new features and content. The future's looking bright and people should be excited, but I feel like a general lack of interest still hovers around this game. The other part of me believes that it's niche to the point that it turns away potential fans. There are a lot of hurdles getting in the way of enjoying Chrono Ark. As my friend said, they didn't pick it up because of the art, the complexity, the localization. Its systems are weird, and the game demands that you learn them. It's a lot to ask even for people who like the genre. In the classic Simpsons quote, Principal Skinner asks if he's out of touch or if the kids are wrong. With Chrono Ark, I can't determine if I'm the kids or Skinner smugly assuring himself that these kids don't know what they're talking about. I feel like Chrono Ark is one of those games that is tailor-crafted to me. Not that I'm full of myself that they made this game for me, but there are certain games that are people's games. More than just a person's number one game, but a game that clicks with them on a deep level, checking off all of their boxes. Chrono Ark is what I want in a piece of media. It's divergent from the norm, expanding upon past ideas, and surprising in the best ways. More importantly, it's so incredibly rewarding mastering its systems. Finding a perfect through line of a turn and making the right play is dopamine straight into my veins. The video essay space is large, and this will be a small drop in the bucket, but I want to get the word out. I will stand up here and shout into the void, Chrono Ark is worthy, and I will sing its praises until I can no longer. The systems are so smart, from the base mechanics to how each card interacts with each other's. It's all gold. AL Fine should be proud of their creation, and I hope people try it out. Thanks for watching.